brought to a breakthrough. In 1980, he created an equation of his own, one that combined all of the Julius sets into a single image. When Mandelbrot iterated his equation, he got his own set of numbers. Graphed on a computer, it was a kind of roadmap of all the Julius sets, and quickly became famous as the emblem of fractal geometry. The Mandelbrot set.
It's not easy to describe the Mandelbrot set visually. It looks like a man, it looks like a cat, it looks like a cactus, it looks like a cockroach. It's got little bits and pieces that remind us of almost anything that you can see out in the real world, particularly living things. So it has a character that reminds us of a lot of things, and yet it itself is unique and new.
The Mandelbrot set is real, an absolute thing, no question whatsoever. Any mathematician or any computer scientist or student in a school can study it and find the same, describe the same thing. It's a common experience. And so such things that can be magnified forever and have infinite precision do exist, but they're not touchable.
It's a geometrical shape, an icon, if you wish, which somehow embodies as an example a very important aspect of how the world works. Somebody recently actually called this set the thumbprint of God.
With this mysterious image, Mandelbrot was issuing a bold challenge to long-standing ideas about the limits of mathematics.
The blinders came off, and people could see forms that were always there, but formerly were invisible.
The Mandelbrot set was a great example of what you could do in fractal geometry, just as the archetypical example of classical geometry is the circle.
When you zoom in, you see them coming up again, so you see self-similarity. You see, by zooming in, you zoom, 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 you're zooming in, you're zooming in, and pop. Suddenly it seems like you're exactly where you were before, but you're not. It's just that way down there, it has the same kind of structure as way up here, and the sameness can be grokked.
Now we'll begin our serious exploration of the Mandelbrot set, a voyage which in fact could last forever and ever, much longer than the lifetime of the universe. I have here the full set, about 6 inches across. Now, if I blow this up, I'll increase the magnification now 13 times, and you see more and more detail is appearing. And the interesting thing is you see mini Mandelbrots, replicas, almost identical, yet perhaps subtly different, of the original set. And I can go on doing this. Here's a magnification of more than 3,000 times. So the original picture, about 6 inches across, is now half a mile across. And no matter how much we magnified it, a million times, a billion times, until the original set was bigger than the entire universe, we would still see new patterns, new images emerging, because the frontier, the M set, is infinitely complex. And when I say infinitely, I really mean that. Most people, when they say infinitely, they mean only rather big. But this is really infinity. is so remarkable, in fact, astounding, about the Mandelbrot set is that although it's infinitely complex, it's based on incredibly simple principles, unlike almost everything in modern mathematics. In fact, anybody who can add and multiply can understand the principles on which it's based. You don't even have to subtract or divide, still less use logarithms or trigonometrical functions to comprehend how the Mandelbrot set is created. In fact, in principle, it could have been discovered any time in human history and not merely in 1980. But the problem is this: although it's only based on adding and multiplying, you have to carry out those operations millions, billions of times to create a complete set. And that's why it was not discovered until the era of modern computers.
Shalom, shalom, family. As always, at the 10-minute mark, let us say the Lord's Prayer. Shalom, brother. So bow with me as we say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path, and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. And even so, Father, be with us in the understanding of what we will provide today. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen, amen, family. Shalom, shalom. I guarantee you, anyone who sees this live today, I guarantee you without a doubt, you're going to learn something new. I guarantee you. So first thing I'm going to show you is a very, very interesting study. It's going to be about a people called the Natufian. I don't see a lot of talks on it. In fact, I don't see almost any talks on the Natufian people. The Natufian people, what I'm going to show you today is that they are actually going to be the genetic line of the Shemites. And I'm going to show you that today with actual genetic and historic information that's going to show these things in its entirety. And I think this is actually biblical evidence of the Bible. That's what I believe. I believe this is biblical evidence of the Bible. Now, the Natufian, they're actually native to the land of Israel. This is the Natufian right here. You probably heard of them already. They're known for their flatbread and beer and different things like that. We're going to talk a little bit about them, about who the Natufian is. I'm going to click something here, and I'm going to play something here. So they're called the Natufian, and I'm going to show you why they're called the Natufian, why they got that name, and we're going to talk about some things concerning them. But first, before I do that, let's talk about some prehistory stuff real fast. I'm just going to open this up, see if this opens for me. If not, I have another way of opening it. Let's try like this. Let's just copy and paste because this isn't directing it. Let's try that again. All right. Let me just go to a place here. I know this has a search button right here, since it didn't open up for me the first time. I'm just gonna go to it on here if I could. Just letting it load up, and then I'll let that play. While this thing is pretty much loading, just for the sake of understanding, if it doesn't load all the way, I'm just gonna open it up on another method. Just trying to get this out. All right, I'm gonna open it up a different way. I'll pull up something from the history, and I'm gonna try to find this one. Let's see. And that's something. I want you to see this thing because this gets a little summary to it. Very interesting to go over. I don't know why it's not opening now, but I'm gonna see if I can pull it up one more time. Right here. Let's see. Okay. Well, this one's not opening for some reason, but let me just look to see if I can find it like this one more time. Otherwise, no, we don't too much need it. It's not like a big thing, but this should be it right here. We'll see if it'll open up. If not, I'll just talk about it real fast. Yeah, it looks like it's not opening up. I'm gonna close this. That's all right. But pretty much the link will be in the description for this one. some reason it's not opening up for me, but it was just opening up a little earlier. But pretty much it just talks about, the ages of these things and whatnot. And I'll talk about that too when we get down there. So let's talk about the Natufian, where they're found. They're actually native to the land of Israel. Now, I got a copy of a PDF of the land of Sidon and some areas of Israel. I just want to open up this PDF. Actually, I'll just click this PDF, just a screenshot right here. I'll go to this one right here. Now, I want to show you something real fast on this PDF. Now, the E lineage is what's found in the Natufian people. The E lineage is found in the Natufian people. Now, you'll get your, right here, this will be your pre-pottery, Neolithic, basically B era. And then you have your C era right there. Now, what's interesting to note here, you're going to have your CT. Your CT brings across your, right here, you're going to have from CT, it brings your CF, which is all the Japhetic lineages. And then you have your DE, which bring your D and your E lineages, which we'll look at today and see what those are. And you can see right here, the E lineage is right here, early in the times. And remember, this is actually spread throughout all Israel. But when we talk about a location indirect, like the land of Sidon, then we start to see some interesting genetics. I want to make a claim here. As I was studying this information, while looking at A00, it looked like it was related to Israel. But upon looking more closer, A00 seems to be a lineage that's found in multiple different places. It's found in the Middle East. It's found in Europe. It's found in different areas in ancient times. So A00 is just something I just wanted to throw out there real fast, that seems to be more closely related with the Hamitic lineages, which is A and B lineages. As you can see here in the land of Sidon, this is actually the land of Sidon. Now, where is Sidon? Sidon is in the land of Israel. Remember Sidon and Tyre, right? Those are going to be places. In fact, I don't know why I don't have a map open. Actually, I don't need a map. Let's just go to, let's go to the time of kings. We just need a map here just to get an idea of the land layout. I find one that's fairly simple, one that's not too complex. Let's see. This one is okay, but it may be a little harder to see, but this is a good one because this is more of a older map. Now you can see here, right here would be Zidon or Sidon is what is right there. That's the land of the Phoenicians, the land of the Canaanites. And if you notice down here, you'll have your northern kingdom, right? Not in the area of Sidon. That's what's important to note, that the Israelites never got into the area. They never owned this area of Sidon. So they kind of curve like this. And then in Judah, it kind of dips even over a little bit in the Philistines because we know, remember, they were kind of growing into the area of the Philistines. We know that also David dwelled in that area. We know Samuel was there. They was near these areas. They was over here as well in these areas. So there's just something to note right here because you're going to see this design as we go over these things and look at the people of the Natufian DNA. And we're going to look at what professionals say about it and everything about these things. So in the land of Sidon, which is the land of the Philistines, going back up here, the land of the Philistines, this is the land of Sidon. And remember, Sidon, Tyre is talked a lot about in the scriptures. Sidon is an area where you are going to see certain lineages that came there, right? You're going to see your A's and B's are going to be native there. And then you're going to have some of the high J's that come there, right? Those are going to be the ones that came from the north, as is described by geneticists, that they came there and invaded. We also got a piece of evidence that also we can look at, and we can also see that they indeed came from the north. As you can see right here, this is an ancient mapping of genetic lines in the land of Europe. You can actually see here, what's interesting too, is that we see E1B1B over here. Now, 96% of Natufian DNA is E1B1B, but there's one lineage that's a separate lineage, which is a larger lineage, but it's younger, which is E1B1A. But E1B1B was seen throughout all of Europe. When I say all of Europe, I'll just show you some places. They were here, E1B1B, they were here in the land where you see Italy, right here. They were also here in Spain, in both of these parts, here and here. So you have E1B1B here in ancient times, here in ancient times, and here in ancient times. And this is actually a long time ago when this was here. And also you have your J's. your J's will actually be like this. And what's interesting is this path is actually known by geneticists when they look at who they call the sea peoples. They know they came from this area and they had settled, they came down, and they think they came from here, but the genetics show that they actually reached all the way over here, coming down and then settle in these areas and in these areas and in Cyprus and different areas like that. They also are in the land of the Armenians. So we also know that because we got a genetic quote that lets us know the J is basically also found in any lineage that's found in the Ashkenaz is found also in the Armenians. Now, what's interesting about this is this E lineage being up in the north at this early time frame. Because what's interesting about it is that the E lineage is actually native to the upper area. But now we're going to note that it's going to also be moving throughout history. But let's go about it one piece at a time. So I just want to show you the genetics first in sighting. Now let's go over a little bit and talk about some things real fast. I'm going to go down a little bit and I want to talk about some things. Now, there is a report by Ancient Origins, which is a channel that basically records history and genetics and a lot of very interesting topics. They get a very wise man who is very known to touch on a lot of topics concerning biblical narratives. Let me see if his name's right here. Aaron, right here. You can see this person right here, Dr. Aaron. I'm going to go up a little bit and I'm going to read you a little bit of what he says about some things here. Now, he talks about some findings in genetics. He says, this is the only match for prehistoric times to date, but it is reasonable to expect many more to come as ancient DNA from Eastern Europe and the Caucasus will be sequenced, right? Because now we're getting more ancient DNA so we can find out who ancient peoples are. So it's really interesting. Interestingly, the Y chromosome haplotypes of ancient Israelites are typically E1B1 and T1 haplotypes. Now that's a problem right there. One, we gotta choose which one it is because we can't have them both being Israelites. Why? Because Israelites come from one father, and these are actually these will lead to two different fathers, two distinct different fathers. Now we actually know which one it is. It's actually E1B1 lineage because T, the reason why T is there, we're gonna look at why T is there and who T actually is. But the E lineage is gonna be the lineage of the ancient Israelites. It says commonly found today in Africa and lower frequencies in the Middle East and Europe. So I just showed you a little bit of how they're in Europe and everything. And it's just talking about some different things and whatnot. I'm gonna go over. I want to talk about something else now. I'm gonna go down. Now I want to show you something really interesting about the Natufian. Now before I go to this right here, I'm gonna go down a little bit and talk right about the Natufian. Now I'm gonna click something here. Now let's talk about the Natufian DNA. Now who are the Natufian? Who are the Natufian? I'm just gonna read a little bit about them. Pretty much they're there during the time frame. They'll tell you certain time frames, but I'm gonna show you that you can find their genetics throughout all of time in the land of Israel. And we're gonna look at that. We're gonna look at this information. We're gonna look at where they got their name from. Let's take a look at these things. So the Natufian Y-DNA found in the Levant is actually going to be, the older one is E1B1B. Those are actually the real Arabs, long story short. And then the younger one is E1B1A. These are actually going to be the real Israelites. E1B1A is different than E1B1B. E1B1B and E1B1A are different. E1B1B is older, E1B1A is younger, and E1B1A is rarer. Now let's also take a look here at some information here, right? So I'm going to show you some very interesting information. First, let me open this. All right, so you see right here, here's a shading of where the lineage of I'm gonna click right here, see if I can zoom in, of the Natufian. This is actually the area where the Natufian is. This is actually too much zoom, but you can see a little idea of them. This will actually be their homeland. This is where they note their homeland is, their homeland. Now, if you notice something interesting, is actually curving around Zidon. Notice how that curve is, how they curve around there, and they're also settled in this area. Don't this look kind of familiar? And notice it's on the outside of remember, what's interesting about the Natufian is that the DNA also is around the area of the Jordan River. Now, why is that important? Because Lot, Ammon, and Edom are all related to the Israelites. So they should have all the similar genetics. They should have a different clade, which is a different branch, but they should be on the same haplogroup. They should be the same haplotype. They should be in the same family, pretty much. And that's actually what we see when we look at the Natufian. We see them all crowded together in the design as it is designed. You can see right here, you can see how this is designed right here, how the tribes is right there. And if we look here, you can see how this is designed right there. Now, the reason why there's a grouping on the outside is because that's going to be, if you look at another map, let's take a look at a different one. This one's good right here. I'm just going to leave this right there. Let's go to a different one. And I want to show you one with, if we have right here, take a look here. You see what we have on the outside now? We have Ammon, Moab, and Edom. Now let's take another look at the Natufian map. You can actually notice that they're on the outside right here and on the inside. That's very important. These locations are extremely important to find Israel. Now, before we continue, let's actually understand something here. Israel is E1B1A, but there's going to be a lot of E1 and different lineages in this, but they're going to be of the E, and we're going to look at that today. That's very important to take note of. Let's keep going and see where does this name Natufian come from? Now, I want to first tell you that the name Natufian comes from Dorothy Gorod. She coined the term Natufian based on her excavations at, I'm gonna butcher this name, Shakab Cave, which is Wadi Natuf, right? Is at Wadi and Natuf, which is in western Judean mountains. Now let's take a look at these western Judean mountains and let's read a little bit about these mountains and where they find the DNA. Now here's the person who found it. I'm gonna go down a little bit. This is the person who found that DNA. Her name is Dorothy, and this was a while back. And basically, she found this DNA of these people while doing excavations based on the biblical narrative. Basically, the Natufian culture was discovered by a British archaeologist, Dorothy Gorod, during her excavations at, like I said, I might butcher that, Shakab Cave in the Jerusalem hills. Now note this, in the west bank of the Jordan River. Prior to the 1830s, the majority of archaeological work taking place in British Palestine was, now note how their work was based upon, because Palestine, the area of Israel, was owned by the British. It says was biblically archaeology focused, right? It was focused on digging based on the biblical narrative, focused on historic periods, and little was known about the region pre-history. So there was nothing before, there was no knowledge prior to this except when this find was found. And then Dorothy had coined the name Natufian based upon the Judean mountains. Now let's take a look about this area, but let's go up real fast and take a quick look. Here's where it was found. Before we start looking at the Judean mountains, this is a certain pinpoint location on the Judean mountains in Israel. You can see right here, it would talk about them. You can see Shakab Cave is located on the northern bank of Wadi in Natuf, right? You can see right there. And then notice what it says. The town is 28 kilometers northwest of Jerusalem. It says this area is within the Judean mountains. Now, it's important to know that when Israel used to bury themselves, they would usually bury themselves in caves. That's very important to understand. And that's where we find this genetics. We actually find them in caves. So let's take a look. So you can see, obviously, this is a site where they do the digs and everything in the West Bank. Get a little bit here. I'm going to close this one. And now we're going to talk about the Judean mountains. So let's look at the Judean mountains. The Judean mountains or Judean hill or the Hebron mountains. Wait, what about the word Hebron? Let's think about that real fast. Where does the word Hebron come from? Let's go down and look at something. I want to show you something really interesting that actually is on this site real fast. Let me actually open it and go to something on this site, and then we're going to look at scripture. All right, so he just has a little information here. I'm going to go to a certain part here that's spoken of on some things. And let's see if I can find it real fast, if I can find that. Let's see. In fact, I believe I would have a screenshot, but I'm just checking to see if I could find that. In fact, I'll do it like this to see if I can find it on the page. Yeah, that's 1-2. You can see right there what it's saying, just talking about one of the persons came from obviously the area where you know today called Turkey. That's why I say a Turkish man of E1B1A or E1B1. Basically led a group of Anatolians. Now, Anatolians, just because they came from the area where you have the Euphrates River. So you're going to have Anatolia over there and in the corner right next to Syria, which is also important to know the exact locations. But let me close this because this is not exactly what I want. I want something more pinpoint. I want to show you something different than that. But let me go down here just to see. All right. I'm going to go right here and let's read something here. I'm going to go a little bit down. Matter of fact, we'll be right here. So obviously in Ezekiel, it has some really interesting things to say, but I'm just going to skip that for now and go down right here. And let's talk about something that happens in Genesis 23. Now, I got to open Genesis 23. And why is these things important? Because when you get pinpoint information from the Bible, you can also find out important information. Now, Abraham did something very important. And by this thing that he did, we can actually find Israel. It's based upon his purchase that he made. He made a very important purchase from the Canaanites. He made a very important purchase from the Canaanites, specifically one type of son from the Canaanites. But let's go and let's take a look here real fast. So here it talks about what happened to Sarah, right? Sarah was 100, right? 127 years old when she obviously left the earth. And then what happened? She died at a place. This place, the same was Hebron, right? Now watch what it says here. In the land of Canaan, right? And Abraham came and mourned for Sarah. And now notice what Abraham did. Now I'm not going to go through the whole story, but he came to some of the children of Heth, which is actually of him, and he bought a field. He basically bought a field. He basically said, let me bury my dead, pretty much. Is an example of that, almost like a decent picture to put, that they had bought a field and they had buried her and everything. You can see right here. It says, "Nay, my Lord, go ahead and bury her," pretty much. Long story short, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can see it's basically all 23 is where it talks about this thing that he's going to buy. I'm going to get right here. Now, note what he says here on this part. Unto Abram for a possession, because he's talking about the field and everything and whatnot. It says, and after this, Abram buried Sarah, his wife. Now, notice where he buried Sarah. He buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field. You see this field right here? And the same is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Now, let's understand this. The field that was preserved, that was a cave where people were burying and putting their their loved ones, where Abraham and Sarah and Rachel and others were buried there, was in Hebron. Hebron's also, let's take a look at some of these things. Hebron is mentioned in the Bible 87 times in the Hebrew Bible. That's how much Hebron is mentioned. So this is another place. Abraham gave up the ghost and died of a good age, full of years and everything. And notice he was. You can see Ishmael and Isaac buried them in a cave in the field. You can see this field right here that they got from the Hittite before them right here and whatnot. And remember that place, that cave and that field is going to be that same place. So you can see the place that he bought, the one that he purchased from Heth, right? Where there was Abraham buried and his wife. You can see what's going on there. And then you can see they was obviously in that area. Now, notice what it says right here in 1 Kings 2:11. And the days that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron and 30 years in Jerusalem. You can see what's going on there. And then you can see some other places right here. Then Abram removed his tent. He also put an altar in Hebron. Abraham put an altar in Hebron. It says, then Abram removed his tent, came and dwelled in the plains, right, in this area, which is Hebron, right? He built an altar there for the Lord. Now, later on, the Levites settled there. It says, now these are the dwelling places where their castles and their coasts. It says the sons of Aaron of the families of Korath, right? Or how you say that, Kohath, or Kohathites. I'm not good with pronunciation. But basically the ones of Kohath, how you say that? For theirs was the lot, right? It's basically they settled in this area, and note where they're going to settle here. It says, and they gave them Hebron, right? In the land of Judah. They gave them Hebron in the land of Judah and the suburbs thereof round about it. So they actually owned that area. They was in that area. And it says it's for the Levites, for their possession and everything. And it came to Judah and Jerusalem and everything. You can see what's going on there. Also notice that other Israelites came there, right? Others of the northern tribe came there. It says, and after them, out of all the tribes of Israel, such as set their hearts to seek the Lord God of Israel, came to Jerusalem to sacrifice to the Lord God of their fathers. You see what's going on there? So now let's look at Hebron. Let's get an understanding of what's going on over here with Hebron. Notice what it says about this Hebron mountains. Hebron mounts. It says is a mountain range in Israel, right? Is a mountain range in Israel on the west bank where Jerusalem and several other biblical cities are located. And the mountains reach a height. You talk about how high it is. The Judean mountains can be separated to a number of sub-regions, including Mount Hebron. You see what's going on there? Mount Hebron, or the Hebron Hills, are basically talks about those mountain ranges around the West Bank and everything in the Judean mountains. It says the Jerusalem Ridge and the Judean slopes. These mountains, now watch what it says here. These mountains form the heartland of the kingdom of Judah, where the earliest Jewish settlements emerged. So the first place where Judah has sat down was in this area. And we know this area was actually a private area that Abraham was burying his dead. He was burying his souls there. So this was actually an area that was private to them. Now, it's very interesting when we take a look at this, because the place where they found it was a cave, but the location where this is actually a surrounding area that actually surrounds, actually right here, watch what it says here. It says the average height of the Judean mountains, just talks about how high it is. Now watch what they encompass. They encompass the cities of Ramallah. I don't know how you say that. Ramallah. I don't know how you say that. Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Hebron. You see what's going on there? Jerusalem, these mountains, the Judean mountains, whereas remember, they usually bury their dead in the mountains, not in the city or on the field or in the lower land. They usually put them in a cave. They put them in the area of Jerusalem, Bethlehem. This one, I'm not going to try to pronounce it again and butcher it. Right here, also Hebron. Hebron is another place where they were. Is that the same Hebron? Yes, that's the same Hebron that's nested in the Judean mountains. Do you see what's going on there? And it talks about right here, Hebron, the second holiest city after Jerusalem. You see what's going on there? It talks about these things. Let's go back. So these are the genetics that we find here. We find these biblical genetics that are going to be very, very important to understand who is this Natufian people. These are actually Shemitic people. In fact, we have right here is actually a linguistics actually says himself that they actually have connections with the Semitic speaking people, the Levant and the Natufians. They basically have some connection. Long story short, let's go back over here. Long story short, when we take a look at the genetics and where they're laid out at, it matches with what the biblical narrative is. It matches 100% of what the biblical narrative is, how it shows us. You see right here, these lands. This is actually a map of the land, the kingdoms of Judah and Israel. So you can see how Israel stretches out that way and Judah is here. But notice on the Natufian, there's an outside force. Why? Because they're genetically related. All those around there is genetically related. But let's keep on going with this and take a look here of those who are on the outside as well. Do I have a map of that? Actually, let me close this. Here's that map. You can see on the outside, right? This is where Judah would be when they had settled in this area. And then you can see Edom, Moab, and Ammonites on the outside of the Jordan River, right? And we can actually see that on the outside of the Jordan River, right? Because they're all genetically related. Ammon, Moab, and Edom, all fairly genetically related. And obviously with the Arabs that are going to be your E1B1B in larger portions. Now let's take a look here real fast. Let's take a look here and continue on these things. I want to show you that what I'm showing you is actually something that is actually reported in 1973. The people of the land of Israel, basically they was doing a study, long story short, here's the study and the publication of it. They did a study and the publication of it, and I want to show you what their results basically got down to. Here's just some information on that time. It's actually going to be 1973 that we're going to be looking at, the first beginning of the study. I want to show you what they found in their study in 1973. I'm going to read it right from their report right here. It says right here, Anstenberg, 1973, suggested that the Natufians and their descendants formed a core population in Israel that could be traced down to recent periods. You see what's going on there? It says, now remember what happened to Israel. They also went into captivity, right? Guess what they also write? It says, but was added to or temporarily displaced at certain times because they went into captivity into different places. Now let's go up a little bit and let's understand something real fast. Now I want to first, before I jump up, I want to show you something. Now that thing didn't open, but I'm going to show you this now of the Natufians. So a long time ago, the E lineage wasn't native to Africa. It was native to the land of Israel. The E lineage was actually native to the land of Israel. In fact, it's proven that CT, I'm going to show you something real fast. You see CT right here? This is actually on a real genetic site. This is family tree DNA. This is actually CT. You see CT right here? CT makes CF and DE. Why is that important? Because DE, and CF are going to be two separate family lines, but they create two distinct different lines. CF creates all your Japhetic lines where you're going to have your J's and I's and your R's and whatnot, all those things you can see right here. All of them are under CT. Every single last one of them is under CT. Every single last one of them. Now, they're also under CT, then CF. CF produces all those. CT also produces DE. Now, what's interesting is CF is actually native to Europe. Now, why is that important? Because they know for a fact that CT creates DE and the lineages of I, J, K, and whatnot, all these things. From CT comes those lineages. And they will say that these have never been in Africa. CT has never been in Africa. CT actually been found up here. CT was actually found up here, and it splits into DE and E. And E is actually found up here. And they'll sometimes say that it comes out of Africa, but actually, if you look at ancient genetic information, we can actually see that CT splits into DE, and all of them split and are found in the Middle East. And some of them, even from the split of CT, are found in Europe. In fact, part of E is found in Europe. Ancient E, that's why I showed you that ancient E is also found in Europe. So you can see ancient E is also found in ancient Europe. So not in the upper areas, but in some lower parts of Europe over here. As you can see, in some places like here. And the reason why, because it would be where, they can travel, they can move around and settle in different areas by sea or even by land, by going over it and different things like that. But you can see they settled in these areas. You can find the ancient E lineages up here, but those are going to be E1B1B. Those are going to be separate than what we're looking at of E1B1A. Now let's go up a little bit. I'm going to show you something. Let's take a look at the Natufian DNA. So this is where the Natufian culture was found. Here's an idea of it. And I'm going to show you the Natufian. You don't only find them in one time frame. We find them in multiple time frames. And that's what we're going to look at here. Area of Natufian culture. You can see this area is where they find it. They also reach up here. What's also important is this location, this very location, is a location where Abraham found his wives. In fact, let's go up a little bit. I'm going to talk about something here. I'm going to go up not too high, but up here. Now, I want to show you something, what happens in a different time frame. Now, before I go up here, let me actually read what's going on this thing right here. So you see this thing right here? This is older. So you can see now, obviously these years, you got to understand what's going on with these years. The reason why these years are so old is just because, you know, they're dated on based upon finds and different things like that. But understand there's another topic when it comes to these years. You can please explain my question. Where did the Natufian people come from? That's right. That's right, family. So, yep. So the Natufian people, the reason why they're named Natufian is because the Judean mountains. Basically a place where they found that at the Judean mountains. That's why they call it Natufian, and that's where they're found. That's their origin. That's what we're looking at today. Their origin is actually up here in this area. This is the earliest we have of the Natufian, right up here. And notice also about the Natufian DNA that you see these time frames. Now, this is actually called the pre-pottery Neolithic era, or A, basically. That's the era of A, basically early on. And then you got your B and you got C. You got one of A, B, and C. Long story short, not to make it too complex, there's going to be your pre-pottery era of A, B, and C. I'll just open this to show what I'm going to show you real fast. And I'm going to show you that E didn't just move up there and just come up there by accident, but it was always up there. It was native up there. And I'm going to show you that we can actually find it throughout different ages that it was up there. Now, I want to show you something right here. So there's going to be different ages. Here's your A, here's your B, and here's your C. See what's going on there? Now, in the time of the Natufian, let me actually go to something right here. We'll go back up to something up there, because we're going to talk about the female DNA too. Now, it's important to know when I'll talk about something with the female DNA, I'm going to leave all the things I'm going to talk about with the female DNA once I get there, because I don't want to make it too confusing. But let me go down to something and talk about the Natufian. In fact, I don't think I went past it yet, or it's up here. Yep, right here. All right, so what's interesting, I'm going to quickly run through this understanding of the Natufian real fast, what we actually find in the Natufian. Remember how I told you the DE is up here and it's split, and then the E lineage is actually up here for a while? I'm going to show you something real fast. So here is a walking path of Abraham's journey, right? Is a biblical understanding of Abraham's journey. I'm just going to click it so that it'll open all the way up. Let's take a look at Abraham's journey. Now, also notice during Abraham's journey, you're going to have some, now, obviously, having understanding on Abraham's journey, what comes where. Like when you're looking at Edom came after, when Jacob was born. So obviously, son of Isaac, brother of Jacob, you're going to have Edom. But now notice these arrows here. Now, where was Abraham called from? From this area, from Ur. He was called and he came over. And then what did he do? He settled in this place called Haran. And then later on, he came down to this area. Remember, God called him and he came down to Canaan. He also came down these areas and he came back up, right? Because what happened? Sarah died, buried her. And then remember, he told the person who was with him. Let's actually read that word for word, how that's worded. He says, this is what Abram said to one of his servants, pretty much. He says, and I will make you swear by the Lord, God of heaven, and the God of earth, that you shall take, now watch what is said here, that you shall not take a wife to my son of the daughters of Canaanites among I dwell, right? But you shall go to my country. Now notice that was his country. You shall go to my country and my kindred. That means multiple families, right? My country and my kindred, and take a wife to my son Isaac. Now remember, we're going to find out where's his country and what place is he talking about is where his lineage is going to be at. He says, is it actually above there in Mesopotamia? He actually says is a city of Nahor. Now we can actually connect this in scripture. What's the city of Nahor? Long story short, it's the region of Syria. We already went over this one day when we went over this and talked about where that is. You can see the pathway here. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob basically went on the same path. They came from here, got their wives. They came down here. They came up here, got their wives, and came down here. And then Jacob, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob got their wives from these areas. Now I want to show you something here. Now. Let's go up and let's look at something. So I got to make sure I show this on a map. Where is that? That's going to be up here. That's also where we find the Natufian DNA. You see this name right here? I'm going to show you something real fast. But before I show you that, I just want to show you on the map. Here's a map right here, a little idea of where these things are pointing. I'm going to open this so it's clear to see. I'm going to show you here what you're seeing here. Shalom, family. Shalom. You see what you're seeing here? You see Syria right here? Note this is Syria. I'm going to show you something that's going to blow your mind. Now, this is important to understand. The Natufians have a different, yes, the Natufians have a different mother Y chromosome in a certain time frame. The Natufians then get a certain line of females that we're going to talk about up here, which is going to be the L lineage. And we're going to talk about that when that time frame comes. And why is that important? That only one group has that L lineage, because the L lineage is actually rare. But before we talk about it, let's talk about the time frames first. First, you have your late, they call it your late Natufian. Basically, when a Natufian is the earliest you find them, is their late Natufian. But I'm going to show you something you see this year right here, 13,000, 11,000. The Natufian been up here for thousands of years. I'm going to show you one from the B lineage right here. You see this B lineage? Not B lineage, basically the post-pottery Neolithic B. You see right there, we're going to look at there, but notice the years here, right? These are thousands of years. These are thousands of years, right? There's going to be a 1,000-year separation. We're going to look at what happens in the time frame of B. Now, what's important to know here first is the Natufian are E lineages. We already know that. But let me show you something on a different time frame that's important. In fact, before we go there, let me show you something up here. I'm going to go to it right here. I'm going to show you something. It's actually very, very interesting when understood. Let me show you right here, All right, so the pre-pottery Neolithic B, right? We already looked at that time frame. That's a couple thousand years later, right? Or 1,000 years later, after you see the evidence of the Natufian. It says the pre-pottery Neolithic B fossils that were analyzed for ancient DNA were found to carry Y-DNA E1B1B CT, which splits. Remember I showed you that? What CT? CT splits and makes DE. That means the ancient line is found up there in the area of the Natufian. And I'm going to show you also what it looks like on a map. This period. This is the time frame we're looking at. B. We're looking at time frame B. So you can see a little bit here. It's also on here with information. Time frame B. So you can see a little information on it. You can see how it looks. You see all this. Where was Abraham? Came from these areas, right? He settled down here. You can see what's going on there. His family was up there. You can see his family would be up here. We're going to look at the genetics here and we're going to see some things. So you can see right here. I'm going to go back to this information right here. Watch what it says here. Now, the one we got a note here, notice that T. Remember what ancient DNA said? They're not playing when they talk about they found the E1B1. They said right here, the Y chromosome, which means the father chromosome, the Y chromosome haplotypes of ancient Israelites are typically E1B1 and T1 haplotypes. And we're going to look at both of those, E and B. But first, we're going to talk about E. Now, you see what's over there? Your E, and you got your T, you got some H's as well. But notice there's going to be your E1B1A. That's going to be your E1B1A. And notice this. This is what's very important. It's not just E1B1A, but it's a long subclad. What does that mean if it's a long subclad? That means they've been there for a long time. The more letters that come after are multiple clads or multiple branches down from the same father. That means they've been there for a long time. It's just not one short piece. It doesn't stop right there, but a long lineage down. They've been there for a long time. You can see right here, this is going to be a little later. In fact, now let's look at where the L3 comes from. You see what you see here? Let's take a look here and notice that this is actually talking about that area, and it even talks about CT clad was also observed in pre-pottery and Neolithic C specimens, 100%. You can see right here. So obviously CT breaking from that area, turn into E and D and whatnot. I'm going to show you now, going back to it, CT right there. All the way, that's thousands of years. That's from here all the way to your C. thousands of years the E lineage been up here. For thousands of years, thousands and thousands of years, they've been up there. Now let's get a little more deeper into it. Let's look at the females line. Now I'm going to show you a study that when it was first released, they didn't release everything, but I'm going to show you the true full release of this study, and I'm going to show you where this study is. I'm going to open up something real fast. I'm going to show you something of the same time period, of the pre-pottery Neolithic period. You can find it yourself. It's not hard to find. You can see how it's laid out, and you can look on this piece of information. It'll give you the direct information for this, but I'm going to go to the highlight already. I'm going to read you something here. And I'm going to read you something, and this is going to be the location where it comes from. This is going to be the location where it's found right here. You see this location right here? We're going to look at this location that you see on this map right here. I don't know if this, sometimes I knew it. When I open that, it's going to take away that dot. But you can see it right there on that map. That's where it is. You can see. And notice, what area is that? That's right above Syria. Where did Abraham and Isaac and Jacob get their wives? Right above Syria, right about here. In fact, let's take a look at this. Now, what's important is that there's a certain group of these people that have a certain line that's private to the line of Israel. Now I'm going to show you something. The material rare basal haplotype N has been found among skeletal remains belonging to pre-pottery Neolithic B, right? It says, as have the mtDNA clades L3 and K. L3 is the one we want to look at. Why? Because L3 is extremely rare. You can look it up yourself, and they'll admit to you L3 is extremely rare. In fact, when the report first came out about this location, about the genetic finds, I'm going to close some of these things so we don't have too much open real fast. So about the genetic finds that were found here in this area, a lot of the information didn't come out when the publishing came out in 2008 or 2005, but no, 2008 right there. But it came out in 2014. I'm gonna read you something here. Sorry if I butcher some of these names. Eva, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it. Extracted samples of basically mtDNA, or the female line DNA, from human bones from, I don't know how you pronounce that, Tel Halula, or that area right here. Let's look at a map. I'm gonna show you on the map where it is. Right here, right above Syria. See where it's right here? And where was Abraham? Where did Abraham go? He got his wives, he got them from up here, right? He didn't get them from here, he didn't get them from anywhere else, but he got them from here, right? Let's take a look here. Let's keep on going. Watch what it says here. So L3 is actually found in the Levant. Watch what happens here. It says, as part of the studies for her PhD thesis, accepted at university and whatnot, and all this. I'm going to go down and I'm going to show you something. I'm going to jump right here and read you something. So basically, long story short, is basically her publication, when it was first published in 2008, it didn't have everything as it had in the publication in 2014. Long story short. Watch what it says here. In the latter publication, I'm going to show you where that's also recorded, where this is actually recorded. This is their information on these things. In the latter publication, the MT haplogroups were given as U, R, O, K, H, V, H, N, and L3. Now let's take a look at L3 real fast. We don't even need to look it up, because you can look it up yourself and find out L3 is very rare. Is a very rare haplotype, but we can actually find it in your common, how they say, that's right here, frequencies, profiles of major haplogroups in Africa and haplogroups in recent African ancestries, right? Remember that, careful with the word Africa. Remember where that word came from, right? The sons of Abraham of Keturah came down into Africa and named it Africa when they took the land of Libya. Now notice right here, L3. These are going to be maybe your E1B1 that goes, your E1B1A that went into Canada, your E1B1A in America. Let's say, in fact, let me open up this so we can zoom in on this, of your L3. This is your L3. This is the line that made Israel, found in Syria. The reason why I wanted to show you this is because I seen a sister kind of rage and say L3 has never left Israel. L3 originated in Syria. L3 right here, L3. You see these L3s? A lot of L's that actually make the line of Israel. L3. You can see in different areas, L3. So a lot of L3s, in the line that you also find the lineage with E1B1A, L3. You see what's going on there? Just to get an idea of it. Got a little more down here. You can see L3. In America, usually that's what you're going to see in them, that L3 lineage. You can get an idea of it, the L3s right here. These are going to be the branches that brings forth these L lineages on this side. It's kind of like three different groupings. You can have your M, N, and L. Now let's go up a little bit and let's continue reading. I want to show you something because I want to show you that this information also that I'm giving you here is going to be very interesting and fairly important, I believe. I want to show you something. Let's see if I can find it on here. I want to show you something real fast. Just taking the scroll down right here. You see this right here about ancient DNA? The ancient DNA of L3 was found in the land of Syria. It was found in the land of Syria. You see, you can get an understanding of this. You can see, as always, you know that Wikipedia keeps sources. So you know Wikipedia is actually a site backed up by other sources, and you can see them yourself just by clicking them, and you can see those sources where these things are coming from. These are actual genetic information is what I'm showing you here. Actual, real genetic information that I'm showing you here. I'm going to close that so it doesn't do anything. All right, so just to show you that this is one of the notes. I didn't add this to the description yet, the E1B1 study, but this one I'll add to the description on those things. So you can see they're found in the area of Syria, just like the scripture said. They will be found up in the area. Also, what's interesting is how did they get in Africa? What happened for them to get into Africa? Well, besides the displacement, we can also find direct information from genetic studies and different things like that. But let's read a little more on that L, right? When I was talking about this, I said I wasn't going to talk about the L right now, but I'm going to talk about it now. The African haplogroup L and L3 are very rare. This is actually what this quote is from here. It's from a medical site. You can see it yourself. They tell you themselves what it is, right? They're going to give you all these things and whatnot. I'm just going to show you that what this is, as everything is going to be cited. Everything's always cited. So you can see right here, I'm going to be reading this information right from this site, okay? You can see some things in the Levant and whatnot. Let's go back over here. So watch what it says here. The African haplogroups L and L3 are very rare, right? Less than 1%. What are the odds for an L lineage to be in Syria when it's only 1%? Only 1% at that ancient time. Very rare to find it up there. So for them to find it just like that means that they were up there. It says it's actually underrepresented in Europe and everything. It just talks about everything and whatnot. Only reason I want to show you this is because I want you to know that L is very rare. L3 is that lineage that's actually in them, but it's also very rare. Let me go down a little bit and read you something real fast. So Africa, how did they get into Africa? Let me just read you something real fast right here. This is actually another quote from another medical, not this one, but from another medical place. It says E carrying males, right? E haplotypes, E haplogroups. That's the Natufian. E carrying males are thus proposed to have back migrated from the parental, right, haplogroups place of origin in Eurasia. Now it's saying that they actually came from Eurasia around, they say, 700 years before present, KYA. It says, well, that's not years before present, but that's KYA as in 70,000 years ago, pretty much. And it says, along with females bearing, now watch what it says here. It says, E lineage also came down, right? They basically saying they got a back migration. And notice who they came with females bearing the material haplogroup L3s. They basically saying they came from Asia down to Africa. And we're going to look at that. They displaced as they say, the ones who belong to Africa. It says, which the study also basically talks about that they originated from Eurasia. It says these new Eurasian, he calls E and L3 Eurasian. These new Eurasian lineages were then suggested to have largely, now watch this, replaced the old Now this one, I was butchered this word, autocharthin. I'm not gonna go try to pronounce it, but I'm gonna show you the definition of it. They replaced the natives to Africa, pretty much. What did they replace? So you can see a little bit of the definition of that word there, just to understand what these, and the reason why they like to be very detailed with certain words, because they do change, or what's the word I'm looking for? Edify what they're saying. It changes or edifies what they're saying. So to have a clear understanding on what they're saying on these things. So I'm gonna let you see this thing real fast when it pops up, and then I'll show you what's going on here. So right here, here's that word. You can see right here, maybe I should have played the thing. Just hear how it is. Touch though nons. You can see right here, and it says of an inhabitant of a place, indigenous, right? Indigenous, why I'm butchering words. Indigenous rather than descendant from migrants or colonists. What is it saying here? It's saying that the L3 lineage, let's go back up a little bit. I'm gonna show you another quote that we know that they did replace the people down there. It says right here, it says that the L3 lineage and the E lineage, right? The E carry any male that has the E lineage, and the L lineage is not native to Africa, but they replace the people who are native to Africa. Let's take a look there. They replaced the male and the female lineages that are native to Africa. Let's take a look here. Let's talk about the traces in Africa. It says traces of these early inhabitants, however, can be observed today in these regions via the present. Now, what is the region's natural haplotypes? What is the region natural haplotypes? Watch what it says here. It says in these regions via the presence of the Y-DNA haplogroups A1A, A1B, A2, A3, B, M60 that are common in certain populations, such as, I'm not even know how to say these names, Mabiti or Mabuti, I don't know how you say that, Mabuti, and Koshin. I don't know if I'm saying those words right, how you say those words. But these are going to be two individuals. I also have some informational videos on them, whatnot, who they are and whatnot. Get a summary of those groups and whatnot. These are actually going to be your native Africans, your A and your B lineages. Your A and your B lineage are native to Africa, not your L, not your L3. L3 is not native. E lineage is not native to Africa. They actually came down there and conquered and took over some places of Africa. That's why you see things called the Bantu expansion. Now, it's important to understand, I'm not going to go over it right now, but I do have some very detailed information on the Bantu expansion that they actually know for a fact that the people in Africa, the E lineage, was not native to Africa, and actually their migration and growth is fairly recent. Their migration and growth is fairly recent, and they recorded that in what they call the Bantu expansion, or the people's expansion. That's what they call it, the people's expansion, because the word Bantu actually means people in the Zulu language. Now to go up real fast. So notice that. I just wanted to show you that's where they find the L. They found the L not around here, but way up north around the area where Abraham found his wives. Let's go back over here. So I want to show you that because that's actually very important to know about these time frames. The E lineage been up here for a long time, and the L3 lineage, which actually is in the E lineage. We find that in the upper area of the Levant. Now let's keep on going, because I want to. We're not even scratching the surface yet. We're just starting to get some understanding on these things and whatnot, because we're going to talk about some more information on these things. Let me click this. Let me see if this thing will open. So I want you to see this. All right, so here's a little bit early. You can see Natufian time, late Natufians. You can see some dots. So these pink dots and these blue dots. You see these pink and the blue. So you see the pink, you see the blue. These are going to be your Natufian DNA, your E lineage. Now, what's interesting is that when we look at this lineage, we can find them all the way up where the Euphrates is. We can find them in different areas like this. We can find them all in the rivers. You can see what's going on there. You can see them all in these areas. You can see them all in near in the areas where you find a lot of the different, Edom, Moab, and stuff like that. in different areas. Very, very, very pinpoint for certain areas. Let's look a little more into this, because we got to prove all things and hold fast to that which is true. We already looked at this one. We already looked at that in comparison with that map over there. I'll just put that down there. But we looked at remember we looked at those caves? I want to show you, there's 90 different sites in Israel. There's 90 different finding sites where they find these genetics and everything. They find these things in that area, up in that area. So you can see where they find a Natufian in that area. You can see them in different times, also in C. I want to show you, in fact, we're not going to go to this one. We'll go a little bit down. This is just some, this is actually, notice that this is called Mount St. Elias, or Elijah, is a coastal mountain range in northern Israel, stretching from the Mediterranean Sea, right, towards the south. The range is a UNESCO basically reserve, basically biosphere reserve. It's a reserve that they reserve pretty much. But this is actually an interesting place too, where they find the genetics. You can see, going back over here, the reason why I wanted to show this is just because it's just another place on the location where you can see right there. That one's probably not as close. So here's an idea. Get an idea on that. Now, the reason why I wanted to show you that is because I'm going to close this and let's talk about something real fast. I think I already opened this one. Just want to make sure. Yep. There's some other caves, just some other caves where they're found and everything. Is Mount Carmel, right? You probably know what Mount Carmel is. You're probably familiar with it. The biblical Mount Carmel, where you see that was a time when you remember Elijah came out. That's why they call it also Mount Elijah, things like that. So Mount Carmel, protected and whatnot. I'm going to go over here. Let's get a little more into the details here, a little more into the details. Now, you can also see quotes like this. Remember how I told you when we looked at that E1B1A, there's also your E1B1B. E1B1B isn't Israelites. E1B1B is Arabs. It's going to be more your Arab, Edomite, Moabites, things like in that sense. According to, now, watch what it says right here. It says, basically according to his analysis, Natufian skeletal remains from ancient Levant predominantly carried the Y-DNA haplogroup E1B1A. Of the 5 Natufian, pretty much the DNA that they found a bunch of these genetic lines right here. So they mostly have E1B1B, right? Mostly, 96% E1B1B, because Israel is small. It's actually fairly small. You can see right here, a little bit on that, on what's in them. You can see it in that time frame. We looked at that PPNB, right? Looked at that time frame. This is just an idea of how long they've been there, right? So-called 13,000 BC, or a long time ago, to 9,000 BC, a long time ago. So you can see what's going on there. They've been up there for thousands of years. Here's another thing, testing autosomal studies. You can see, you can get another idea of them in the lands and stuff like that. That's just another idea, whatnot. But that's autosomal. I'm gonna go up here. I just want to show you something now. I'm going to show you something a little different. I want to make sure if it's up here, down here. In fact, it's down here. All right. We already talked about Hebron and everything. We talked about that area and what DNA we find there and whatnot. I want to show you something. I want to make sure I don't think I showed enough on this one. I need to show something real fast. Let me just make sure it's not underneath here. In fact, it is. This is going to be a quote. Just pretty much, when we think about how did they get into Africa, I just showed you a little bit of that, but how did they get into Africa is really interesting to see that. I think Brother Will, he went over some very deep information. I'm going to play something from there real fast. But first, I want to show you something that he read. And it took me a long time to find because I wanted to make sure this book was had. And I want to talk about this thing. The reason why I want to talk about this thing is because it's really interesting. Yeah. When we look at those years, I know those years is a little exaggerated. When we think about 9,000 BC and stuff like that, we just know that as in ancient times. The best way to understand is that ancient times to the time of the kings. But let me show you something besides that. But I'm glad you point that out, family. Those years are definitely, when we think about the biblical narrative, those years definitely are exaggerated. Those years are extremely exaggerated. But you can see yourself that the E lineage been up there for a long time. But let me show you something now. I'm glad that you actually pointed that out, because that's something I also wanted to talk about, to be careful in those years. I want to read you something right here. So I took a screenshot of it because it was fairly hard to find. You had to find the exact one. It has to be this, basically this, and universal history from early accounts of time, general description of Africa. Now, it's going to be in the book of 1760. It's going to be in chapter or section 1, book and volume. I don't know how you say that in the Roman numerals, but XV1. I forget how you say that in the Roman numerals. I think that's a 10, and that's a 5, and that's a 1. So that might be 16. Might be 16. I'm thinking book 16, maybe. All right, so let's take a look here. The reason why I want to show you this is because I want you to show you how accurate this quote is, and I'm gonna go to this video and let Brother Will explain it, because he gives this really, I don't know how he found this book. I don't know how he found it, but this is a groundbreaking find. This is a groundbreaking find. I can't stress it enough. The reason why is because it's going to show you all the exiles of Israel, and I'm going to explain each one individually on each exile and how we know that those exiles are going to be pinpoint accurate. But notice that this is actually going to be, basically a bunch of historical minds come together and want to understand these things and whatnot. I just want to show you that this book is not a small book. There's going to be a lot of names in it. A lot of people knew these things. A lot of professionals came together to make this book. This is a very, very important find in this book. So I'm gonna actually go to a video here. So this is the quote, and it'll be in the description and everything for these things. But I'm gonna let you see now this part right here. I'm gonna let you see this part, which is at 2:05:30.
Erie Kingdom. All right, this is so. What page is this, real quick? It's page 22. This is coming from the book, The Modern Part of an Universal History from the Earliest Accounts of Time, 1760. All right, yeah, 1760. Zoom this in for you all. It says, we're gonna go right here where it says among those herds.
And y'all can see this is a very old book. This is actually a photocopy of the book because it's using those old Fs, the old S's that actually look like Fs.
Right, facts. So we're going to start right here where it says since which time they have lived dispersed into several provinces of that empire and have made but an inconsiderable figure in it. There are some who call themselves original Jews of the prosperity of Abraham, who pretend to have formerly come in colonies and to have settled themselves in Egypt, Abyssinia, and along the Niger. All right. And these last are more numerous and considerable than the last former. Let me read that again. These last are more numerous and considerable than the two former. This is basically this next sentence right here that I just read is saying that the Jews of the Niger are more numerous and more considerable than the two former. So the Jews on the Niger was more numerous and more considerable than the Jews in Egypt and Abyssinia. We just told you about in 1830, the Ashkenazis knew that the 10 tribes was at the Niger River. But continuing, but those who had come and are here still in the greatest number are such as refugees themselves in their parts, either after the destruction of Jerusalem, that's 1, after the dispersion of the Jewish nations by Titus Vespasian, that's 2, mentioned in the former chapter, or fled from the other persecutions under the Romans, 3, Persians, 4, Sartians, 5, And since under the Christians, 6 out of Italy, 7 in 1342, out of Spain and Portugal, 1462, 8 out of the Low Countries, 1350, 9 France, 1403 England, 1422. So we see up to about 10 different ways.
Wow.
All right, so I just want you to see a quick read of this book. Now I'm gonna break this down. What did he just read there? Now, sorry for that this is so light, but I'm gonna break this down because this is actually very, very important to understand in the detail of what they're saying here. They're basically revealing to you that the ones who went into Africa, they're actually going to be known as being the original Jews. And remember, we just found that the E lineage has potential of being those people. In fact, I'm going to show you some other quotes on some things that we're going to look at on these things, on what other geneticists say about these things and how they also verify these things, the ones who actually were studying these things. But let's look at this. I'm going to show you something. So notice the ones obviously lend a know the ones in the Niger, southern the Niger of the West Africa was more numerous and more considerable. That basically means more considerable, meaning more likely to be Jews. It says, then the two former says, but now watch what it says right here. Watch what it says right here. I'm gonna read this. But those who came and are here still in the greatest number. Now watch what it says here. Are such as, now they don't say that they think they are. Watch what they say. Are such as refuged themselves in these parts. They say that they refuged in these parts. Watch what they say where they came from. Either after the destruction of Jerusalem, that's 70 AD, and basically the displacing, or I can't even that F's that got me, is as basically the displacement of the Jewish nation by Titus Vespasian. Now this is actually important. This is actually going to be the event of Simon, son of the star. This is 132 to 135 AD. This is when Titus Vespasian took 1/3 of his whole army and displaced all the Jews. Not many people actually know about this event, but for the people who's writing this and saying that these are even these Jews that was displaced during the siege on Jerusalem in 70 AD, and in the return when they came back during the revolt of what is called Simon, son of the star, pretty much Bar Kokhba revolt, they sent them away right after they destroyed Jerusalem. They destroyed the foundations. They destroyed the walls. They sold the city with salt, and the people was displaced. They said that these ones are actually them, the ones who were displaced by Titus Vespasian, which actually was sent into Africa. Mentioned in a former chapter. They say that they already spoke about this event in a former chapter. They know for a fact that this is true, is what they're saying. Or who fled from former persecutions under Rome. Now, why say former persecutions? Because let us know as Rome was persecuting them and everything, they were fleeing from that. Also from the Persians. Now, watch what it says. The Sarkians. Who are these people? The Sarkians. Who are these people? This is the Arabs. You can look it up yourself. Who are these people? It'll let you know that they were desert dwelling people. They were people that was in the deserts. These are actually, the other word for them is the Sabaeans. That's another word for these people. It's the Sabaeans. They're the desert people. They're the people that was in the desert, that they were actually the real Arabs. And how were they being persecuted by the Arabs? When were they persecuted by the Arabs? After 70 AD, after 335 AD, the Jews settled in the land of Arabia. You can actually see this actually documented by one of the brothers, very well documented by one of the brothers named Truthful and Edited. And he has a video of how the Israelites fled into Arabia, which is historically documented and is also known by a war. There's a war that they go through that is recorded during the time of Muhammad when he was fighting with the Jews. And then the persecution of the Jews came and they were pushed out of Arabia to Africa. They were pushed out of Arabia. They were pushed out of all these different areas. It says, and since under the Christians, how were they persecuted under the Christians? By the Portuguese, right? The inquisitions that was going on in that area as out of Italy, right? You get the dates on these things and all these things. Now it comes to the dates and whatnot. And right here, you can see this one's an earlier dispulsion from Spain and Portugal. Obviously, there was multiple dispulsions that happened in Spain and Portugal. So you can see they got all these different ones from France, from England, all the Jews. Now imagine if the Jews had a certain distinct look to them, they had darker skin, how easy would it be to recognize who's a Jew in Europe? And that's an example there. And also we find their genetics in the lands where they once were. In fact, so you see how they got all those exiles there? Let me show you what also geneticists say, because I may have not shown this. Let me go up real fast. So remember how I told you during this right here, basically this thing in 1973, basically when they was doing those studies, whatnot, in the University of Tel Aviv and whatnot. I'm gonna click this so you can see right here. This is just would be where those reports were written here, just to show that if someone wants to get more deep into it. Let me actually go right here and show you something. I'm going to show you something here. Did not mean to do that. Let me actually reopen that thing I just closed. Let me show you something. Let me show you something really interesting on here, because this is going to be something that I think is considerable. Because when we look at what geneticists say, we should consider a little bit what geneticists say. I just showed you what the historical people say. And now I'm going to show you what geneticists say. I'm going to copy this thing and show you something on here. All right. All right, let me show you something. All right, look at this. I'm going to read you something. So before I show you this, remember I showed you another report right here where it says about this report in 1973, right? That one I was just showing you after they put the publications of the people of Israel. There's actually, this long story short, I guess I'll give a summary of what this is. It just talks about a goal right here of doing research on basically those of the Levant and whatnot, and just long story short of what they're doing there. Let's keep on looking right here. I'm going to show you something. It says right here, this report in 1973 suggested that the Natufian and their descendants formed a core population in Israel that could be traced down to recent periods, but was added to or temporarily displaced at certain times. Now let's look up here and see what they say right here. Here's another one. You can see it's a different site, different place, different information. You can see some names here. Get understanding on these things and whatnot. It talks about high resolution of Y haplotypes of Israeli and Palestinian Arabs and whatnot and whatnot. We're going to look at something right here. Watch what it says here. Just talks about them that's there. Watch what it says here. It says based on archaeological evidence, right? On the digs, on the evidence of the digs, it has been suggested that the Natufian and their descendants formed a core population that can be traced to recent times, but was mixed with incoming groups. You see what's going on there? That's in that one. That's that one in 1973. Now, it also talks about some things. Watch this. According to historical records, major demographic events took place in the Israelite period and during the Jewish kingdom period. You heard what he just said there? And then it goes on and let you know the time frame, and says the Assyrian and Babylonian invasions were followed by the deportation of locals and settlements of foreign peoples. You can see what's going on there. It also talks about the Roman Judean wars and all these things. So it's saying that the Natufians had evidence throughout. You can look, remember how I told you about those events? You can take a look at these events. Remember that's the same one. It talks about they was in Arabia, in the Arabian area. They was also remember it said they were persecuted by the Christians and everything, all those things. It talks about the Second Temple. When it talks about the annex of the Second Temple, it says a large portion of the Jewish populations and everything. Got that in another study. By 5th century, it talks about them all. It talks about it all throughout all the time and where they actually went, the genetics and everything, and where they was moving through all the time. Notice that the Natufian are the ones that are actually, now who is the Natufian? They're going to have the E lineage. In fact, did you know that the people of the land, they know that they actually say that the J lineage is the lineage of Israel? Do you know that they actually took the time to do a study on where is the J lineage, but they know it's only in Sidon. But let me show you something. They also tried to find they were searching in the Natufian, they tried to find a J. This is what they found out. This is a genetic report. You can see it right here. It's going to be a genetic report. This is what they say, because they know the Natufian are the Israelites. Watch what it says right here. In one of their studies, that Haplogroup J was absent in all. Listen to me when I say this. Haplogroup J was absent in all Natufian and Neolithic Levant male individuals examined thus far, but emerged in the Bronze Age. Why they emerged in the Bronze Age? Because they're found in Sidon as being the sea peoples. That's another topic for another day. But going down a little bit, just to get another understanding on this, I'm not gonna go everything on this note, but I just want to give a little understanding on the Natufian people. So the J lineage is actually, like I said, is native to different areas of the north. You got some of the E lineages, the E1B1B, they're going to be over here, but your E1B1A, those are going to be native. Those are going to be native to the Levant, as in we see right here, the earlier Natufian, they've been there for thousands of years, even up to the time of the kings. That's what that report was, that they actually are. There's evidence of them being there during the time of the kings. There's evidence of them being there until their exile, and they was displaced, just as the scripture has said. So a lot of things that the scripture has said was going to happen, happened, and we can actually find the evidence of these things, of the people that were scattered in all nations, fallen by the edge of the sword, and Jerusalem was given to the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles was fulfilled. Now I want to show you, what I want to do is show you some real quick videos real fast on some information on these things. So here's a information on the dig of the Natufian. In fact, I'll show you, before I show you that, I'm going to show you what this woman found. She found a very interesting thing. Besides also this information, the Natufian are known for the flatbread, right? If you probably know about the first flatbread, the world's oldest bread found, right, in prehistoric site, basically, long time ago in Jordan. So you can see right here, they were making flatbread, whatnot. And it lets us know these were from the Natufian. It lets us know that there was this culture that did this was actually from the Natufian. I don't know if I have that right directly in front of me right here. It says right here, evidence from the site indicated the Natufian had a meat and plant-based diet. Just talks about the Natufian and everything. They was there in the land, settled in the land of Jordan. So let's go over here. Now it's important also to know that the people of Sidon, the original Canaanites, guess what haplotype they are? They're going to be A's and B's. They're going to be A's and B's. That's why I also had talked about it's possible that the A lineage, A00, may also indeed be a Canaanite, may not even be Israel, but yet they obviously moved with Israel, moving around with them, which we also note in the scriptures that, remember, Judah had a thing with the Canaanites and all these things were going on. So we had some things that was going on with the people of that land, right? So just to get an understanding on there, most likely A00 is actually going to be as A and B lineages. So they're actually going to be native to that land. The reason why is because there's more of them there. It's more larger there. We also see high Bs. Now, it's important to understand ancestral and derived states. That's just basically letting us know that if they're a little bit different from their ancestor, they're going to be derived states. And if they're the same as their ancestor, they're going to be ancestral states. They get their ancestral states still with them, the ancestral clades. But if they change a little bit, then they're going to be derived. Doesn't really make too much a difference in understanding. It's going to be from the same haplogroup. Long story short. But the reason why I wanted to show you this is because it's interesting when seeing what happened. In the land of Sidon, all of a sudden, you're going to have during a time, the sea people come there that settled in that area. Very, very interesting to take note of. But let me go down and show you something real fast. I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to show you this now. Now, the reason why I want to show you this, let me close these. The reason why I want to show you this is because this is an example of what the Natufian looked like. Yeah, it came. It was not the sea people. J came with one. That's. Let me actually click that. Yes. Let me actually verify that saying. Yes. The original sea people, the one that settled in the Philistines, they had the R lineage. They had that R269. but there is going to be a group that settled in Hebron that technically they say are sea people, or in a sense they came from the north. They call them sea people that came from the north. Rather, they're just a mingled company, but they have mostly J. And yes, most likely they are from the Haranians, how you say that. And that's a great point. I'm glad you put that there. There's a people who, yep, that's right. In fact, that's something that I'm going to go over to another time. That group of people that are the mountain people from the Zagros Mountains. I'm glad you talked about that because I actually want to talk about that one time. So I had talked about that before. So it's about Armenia. That's actually who they are, long story short. The ones in Georgia and stuff. Those are going to be the ones of Armenia. This is a different one that I'm making to go over a different time. But this is pretty much that group that you're talking about there. This is that group you're talking about there, I believe. Unless I clicked the wrong one. Not this one, but let me see if it's this one.
This video.
This one, okay, too. But that's not the one I want to show. Maybe this one. If not this one, it's to be the one at the bottom. Yeah, let's go to the one at the bottom. Just to see. If it's not this one, then I know where it's at. I know exactly where it's at, but it's probably not in one of these. Nah.
First, to build.
Close that. It's on a different, it's on one of the pages where I post that. But yes, this is actually going to be that area where you get those people, that grouping of people. And that's actually on a video where I have that information actually posted. Let me actually go to that video real fast. Let me go to that one on here. If I remember right, I think I put it I put some information on that on probably not this one, but maybe on this one. So this is going to be, obviously, this is going to be a live for the Synthetic Sunday. It's going to go right on our Synthetic Sunday little list. Let me just see if it's here. Right here. This is what he's talking about right here. The Haran people, or how you say it, Haran. So right here, Haran is a people that migrated. I'm gonna copy this. I'm actually gonna move this over here because I don't know why I didn't put it on that note. But I'm glad you said that. And it's good. Family is always good to find brothers and sisters that's looking at these deep things, because where we are in this time, we definitely need, to examine the truths of what's going on in the world today. Yep, that's right. In fact, that group is also on this thing at the bottom. It's actually on this thing on the bottom somewhere. Let me actually see if I had that still open. There's actually a group that was more down here and some up here in different areas. There's actually in different types of areas right there. So this is pretty much it. This little video. This is the people right here. This is who they are. And I guess let's go to a map here to get an understanding on where they at right here. This is what he's talking about. That's Armenia. That's actually what it is. Long story short is that they're the same peoples. They're Armenia. That's pretty much, they're connected with Armenia and whatnot. That's why I made that. Actually, good that you're talking about that, because that's actually something we'll go over and talk about that J lineage and how it's connected with Armenia right here. Let me actually put this down here. There you go. I don't know why it was like that. So they're also with these ones. I think you mentioned that. I think he actually mentioned that. Yeah. Somewhere. I remember you mentioned it before, that those two groups are connected. Yes. These two groups are connected. The Matani and these ones. These two are connected. So it's good you actually pointed them out with the Akkadian peoples and whatnot, and their Akkadian language, which is actually that cuneiform and whatnot. They were isolated in the north. So it's good you actually found that. It's good you noted that, because that's actually important to note. Maybe I'll put this in the description too. Let's go. I'm gonna close this. Not to get too off track, but amen. Knowledge is always good. Knowledge is always good. Good information. Good information. I'm gonna close this one too. Yes. All right. And I'll leave this one. I'll just leave that there. All right. I want to show you what the Natufian, what they look like. Some maybe like their hair and stuff like that. Just to get an idea on what they look like, where they're found. There's one female. She had found a very interesting article that I think was a very good find. I didn't see it myself. I never seen the article, but this is the only place where I've seen this article. Besides, I'm sure it's easy to find online. But I want to show you what she found, what she talks about, and everything with it.
Okay, my name is Tosh. I'm a developer. I geek out. I'm a mom. I'm an author, and I do the reviews on mynaha.com for hair tutorials and whatever else. So I'm going to start trying to brand myself here, and I'm going to start adding little things that go through my mind that I see that really intrigue me. And what I wanted to bring to you today was National Geographic. Okay, I know you've probably seen this in Instagram or Facebook or whatever, but I just want to elaborate for all my people out there. This just killed me because I grew up looking at all the Cleopatras and all the evidence and the books in school, or nah. But I love this. In Minya, Egypt, a day ago, they found a skull. You see this skull here, guys? This is what killed me. I do braids. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a nice little lineup that they have. They have all the braids sectioned up. And it lasts. That's a great protective style. Look how long it lasts. So I'm going to go down to the article. These braids are from the 1300 BC. That's a great protective style. So it's basically a photo by Renee F.I. Photo for the excavations from the commoners. These are regular people in the cemetery of Egypt. Built by the Akhenaten, the 18th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh in the 1300s BC, revealed that people were buried on the desert floor with free markers or grave goods that have been found. Elaborate braids on the skull reflected the care that the residents took on their appearance despite difficult conditions. Who knows how to take care of your hair? Difficult decisions? Difficult conditions? Let's think. Like near the city of Menya, modern Egyptians still honor their dead by building permanent structures such as the cemetery of domed roof and limestone walls. So these people were buried in the floor underneath the city. And this is the ancient city of Armana. And I'm probably saying it wrong. I don't know why I have an accent when I'm trying to say it. Let's see. The elite prepared elaborate tombs which carved high into the cliffs of the city. And so you can find more information here. This is National Geographic, found this a day ago, and I had to blast this out. And it's telling my thoughts. So I tagged my daughter. I'm like, yay, when I do your cornrows, you want them like this? They'll last longer. And then I'll have to take your braids out in 4 weeks. And I'm like, you know how many times I've ruined my hair like that? I just did a twist out. It was kind of like that. It's crazy, but it's phenomenal. And amplifying and empowering at the same time, but it's like and then after doing like my DNA test, I'm gonna pause, wait for it, we're gonna go here. So you can find more about this at the this site called the Amarna Project, and you can find more information on everything on here. And this is the people that are actually excavating on this site. They have models of the city, what the city looked like. Hey, here. What's gonna happen? We're gonna go over here for a second. When I did my DNA, here, gen match. You have to use the ancient Eurasia K6 admixture proportions, because I'm like, okay, who are my people? Where are they from? Because the sub-Saharan stuff is so vague, just to organize everyone who's sub-Saharan, but there's more to it than that. It breaks down more than that because there's so many different cultures in sub-Saharan. You want to know. But what I found in this sucker is, what is this? So I have like 8 point something ancient that is Natufian. And I had this theory that all black people come from Israel. So this is my theory, and I'm like, well, can I prove in my DNA? And so 8% of me in my ancient DNA comes from Natufian. So I'm like, okay, what is this? Okay, we got Yoruba, Isan. Okay, cool. Sub-Saharan, that's Yoruba, Isan. But what is this ancient stuff? Because the Yoruba people weren't in Yoruba 12,000 years ago. They migrated to Yoruba. They were somewhere else. Think about it. Okay, so these people here, these Natufians, is 1200 to 9000 BC in the area of Egypt. Woo! And they refer to the Basal Eurasians. And if you're a European, it does not apply you interact with your ancestors. So these people here are called the Natufians, and I have 8%. So let's read more about this stuff. Who are the Natufians? So we can go to this website here. Natufian people live in communities, some large and semi-subterranean houses, and semi-culture, some roof structures, excavated peristyle, and stone, wood, and perhaps brush roofs. Let's see, the largest Natufian communities called base camps found to include Jericho. Where's Jericho? You all know Jericho in the Bible. And the walls came tumbling down. Jericho, Jericho. We all know Jericho. This related, this is top. And let's do a map. Oh, here's a map. Where is this? Is that around Israel? What is that? Egypt? Israel. So I want to figure out, I want to know what they're using, what products they're using here in their area.
Now, the reason I wanted to show you that because I wanted to show you what she found and what she, obviously the DNA that she has she's Natufian. She has Natufian in her. So that's also very interesting. Here's also the dig. Here's also some information on, because since we are synthetics doing that synthetic Sunday, we're doing synthetic information, right? Information on genetics. Let's actually see a full run through of pretty much what's going on here.
The Natufian culture was a group of people that lived in this part of the world, today's Israel, Lebanon, Syria, the Levant, around 15,000 to 11,000 years ago. Now, these people were not agriculturalists, they were hunter-gatherers, but they were systematic collectors. They were hunting and gathering on a massive, diversified scale. And that diversification, the different kinds of foods that they were collecting in their natural environment, their beginnings of a systematic collection of grains and creation of compound little sickle tools to harvest grains, and systematic collection not only of large mammals, the gazelles and aurochsen and other kinds of large mammals that live in this area, but also small mammals and fish with dedicated fishing villages. That kind of diversification has been called the broad spectrum revolution. When we think about how agriculture emerged, that emergence was not initially because of the actions of a really smart inventor who figured out that if we plant seeds in a certain way, they will grow and we can harvest them and collect a share of them and keep some to plant the next year. No, this is a process that emerged over thousands of years as people began to use resources more systematically in particular places. Natufian people were among the first in the world to be sedentary hunter-gatherers. They lived in permanent or semi-permanent settlements. They built structures that were simple by the standards of later peoples in this area, but still had huts that were made of branches and leaves and with circles of stones forming their foundations. They buried people in contexts immediately in or around their villages. They were coming back to these places and using them for long periods of time. And they were investing resources, labor, work, social ties into these places. Because they were using these places so intensively, they began to use the resources around these places more intensively. They were increasing, if you like, the efficiency of extraction of foods and other resources from these places. They were trading over longer distances. They were developing denser, more stable populations. And we now recognize that all of those changes were really precursors to the invention of agriculture, where you're staying in a place long enough to store foods there, to replant seeds the next year, and to stay there or return there to harvest them in the following year. That kind of cycle of life really necessitates that you have already adapted to a more sedentary lifestyle. The Natufian people in this area were some of the first peoples anywhere in the world to make that transition. El Wad is...
Notice that he says, as many people say, the Natufians were the first to start doing some of the agriculture things that were going on in that area. And some of the first flatbread, some of the first things that were going on in that area was definitely by the Natufian. That's why we're going to look at these things. Also, let me also bring up a piece of information from a linguistic, someone who studies language, and read what he says about these things. This is what he says about the Natufian. So he's obviously looking at some people. He's looking at their teeth. He's looking at the Natufian teeth, and he's going to see what's on their teeth. So here's who he's looking at. Look at the Christian Natufian right there. He's looking at the Natufians here. He's looking at those Natufians, West Africa, Natufians, and West Africa, right? You got your Natufians, Southern Levant, Natufian, West Africa, because those in West Africa are highly related with the Natufians. Natufian, West Africa. Notice what he says about West Africa and Natufians. He says, basically he talks about some things, looking at the dental traits studied in Southern Levant are multivariantly 4 times more similar with Natufian teeth than are the Southern Levant teeth, like those of West Africa or late, I don't know that Paleolithic, I don't know how you said it. Basically, ancient Nubia, for the sake of understanding. Go down a little bit right here. Now watch what it says here. This paper makes an additional reference, right? Since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reasons to believe, now watch what he says here, that the Natufian were related to modern Shemite-speaking people of the Levant. Now that's what a Natufian is. They're actually Shemites. Long story short, they call them Natufian. They're actually Shemites. I suggest that some part, if not all, of the Afro-Asiatic family originated north of Africa proper. He says that actually those with the E lineage, long story short, didn't start in Africa, but they're actually Afro-Asiatic. That's why you'll see that sometimes, that Shemitic is actually an Afro-Asiatic language. It's an Afro-Asiatic language. It says, since Natufian culture dates to, it says 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, it suggests that the age of the Afro-Asiatic language family might also be about that old, because that's also what the West Africans were speaking, an Afro-Asiatic language. They actually have an Afro-Asiatic language down there. So very interesting when you take a look at these things. So he basically says that the Natufian are Shemitic. I'm gonna show you a little more information on the Natufian. Let me go up a little bit right here. Right, we already looked at their genetics and everything. I'm gonna open up a map here. I'm gonna open up a map and I want to show you something. So we already looked at that. So we just seen that he basically says they have, this is actually what they write. It says, according to basically this person, this linguistic, he says there is archaeological and physical anthropological evidence for a relationship between modern Shemite-speaking populations of the Levant and the Natufians. Saying the people who spoke basically Shemitic are related to the Natufians, is what he's saying there. Now let's talk about this real fast. I want to show you something. So remember I had showed you the map of them and everything in these areas. It's just everything that you see here, every pinpoint, these points, these points, these points, these points, all these points, any point you see is where you find your Natufian DNA. You find them all out here and over here. So you find them in these areas where we find Edom, Moab, we find Ammon, we find the Edomites, we find we find the Ishmaelites, and we find obviously Israel. You find them all there, and you find different lineages of these lineages. Now, remember how I told you that the E1B1B is larger. E1B1B, there's a larger portion of the E1B1B lineage. There's a larger portion of it, larger portion of E1B1B. Let me go down and I'm gonna show you something now. See if it's on here. Let me just scroll and see if it's actually down here. I want to show you a study real fast on where the Natufian are. I'm going to show you a study on where the Natufian are real fast. And I think that it might be down here. Let me just grab that one right here. And I think it's this. All right, so now I'm going to show you something. I just got to open up another note because I want to show you something with the Natufian. If you notice with the Natufian, if you look at the whole map, this is very important to know about the Natufian DNA. The Natufian DNA fills all of this area. That's the truth about the Natufian DNA, that there's many sites where the Natufian DNA is found, which is the E lineage. They call them Natufian, but it's just the E lineage. But let me show you something. I'm gonna show you why they're in certain places. I'm gonna read you something from something. Let me just open up a note. When studying upon Ishmael and some of the Arabs, we learned something very interesting, right? We had seen a quote where it said that basically the king of Arabia moved his people into Libya, right? Those people was called Sabi. He moved those people into Libya, and that place, he gave it the name Africa, right? Let us know the Moors are Arabians. Let's read from Flavius Josephus' writings. Watch what Flavius Josephus, the first century historian, says. He talks about Abraham, who married Keturah. He said he had 6 sons from her, right? All these sons. From one of the sons came an event that happened. Let's go down. So right here, there's Ophrin. We're going to look at this Ophrin, what happens from him, one of the grandsons. Right here it says, now for all these sons and grandsons, Abraham conceived to settle them in colonies, and they took possession of, I don't know how you say that, Togoldeth. I'm never going to try to pronounce it. I already tried to, probably butchered it. This place, he moved them to this place, and this place is Syria. Long story short, this place is Syria and the country of Arabia the Happy. So Abraham moved some of his people to the place of Syria and Arabia the Happy, which is Arabia, as far as it reached to the Red Sea. Now watch where else they went. They didn't just only settle there. It says, this is what was recorded by a first century historian. It is told about that this Ophrin, that he made war against Libya and took it, right? Libya is actually going to be, remember, that's why it's important to see on ancient maps. We can even look in the map of the time of Herodotus, right? Look at the time of Herodotus on his map. Let's take a look at that. Here's his map right here. Is the idea, right? Here's the map Herodotus, right? 400 BC, basically, around that time, 400, 500 BC. You can see the Scythians right there. Now notice he said that Abraham moved his to here and over here in Arabia. All the way, this is the Red Sea, all the way to the end of the Red Sea, pretty much. Now here's Libya. He said that the people in Arabia also moved their people into Libya. That means all of Upper Africa. All of Upper Africa should show lineages of the line of Israel. That's what we should see. We should see all of Upper Africa, only Upper Africa. We should see the all Upper Africa, because underneath Upper Africa, underneath it is Ethiopia. Underneath Libya is Ethiopia, as you can see a little bit right here. But on this side of the Euphrates, everything on this side of Euphrates and above, because it's actually talking about, because you notice how it's bent like that. That's actually the Nile. And you know, if you look on the map, you know the Nile doesn't bend like this. The Nile doesn't bend like this. But this is actually a map made by the Europeans of how much they knew of Africa at that time. The Nile doesn't bend like this, so they didn't have a big portion of Africa. They only know a little bit of Africa. But right here, everything on this side of the Nile was all Libya. But it's also important to know that they filled all of Upper Africa, because we know that because it's documented that they filled all of Upper Africa and called it Africa. So they took all Libya right there, and they called all of this Africa, right? And if we look in genetics, we can see a clear split, right? Just go down and look at genetics real fast. If we look at genetics, we can see a clear split right here of E1B1B. Notice they're also up here, right? They're in some of these areas. They're in these areas. Remember, I showed you on another map that they're in these areas. Going down a little bit here. Remember, I showed you these are ancient. This is ancient DNA. Ancient DNA here. Your E1B1B lineage is over here, and over here is also here, and is here. And we can look on a genetic information, and what do we see? We see that they're here in these areas. They're in the boot right there. Remember how we showed they was also in Italy? They're also here. They also settled here. Remember they came here? So apparently they was here too. They was over here as well. But they also took this area. This also is described in the Bible. Let's not in the Bible, but in the historical sources. Let's look a little more. Let's go back up there and let's read one more time just to get a clear understanding. Then I'm going to show you something on the Natufian map. I'm going to show you on the Natufian map, like we just looked at. So the sons of Abraham that were in Arabia took Libya and called it Africa. As right here, they warred against Libya and took it, and that his grandchildren, when they inhabited it, called it from his name Africa, recorded by a first century historian. Showed us that the name Africa was given to sons of Abraham and called the name Africa. Now let's look at that on a Natufian chart. Do we see that? Yes. We see that the sons in Arabia, look how dark it is. Look how dark it is. E1B1B completely filled this area. Who was here in this time? The Arabs. Do we find ancient E1B over here? Yes. We find an Arab lineage that moved down here because it was in Arabia Felix, right? That's why it's also important to see that map. We can also find those names. Remember, we've seen that in another ancient quote right here in this book, where it says, this book is, what is it, 18 something? History of Moors and 1835 right there. Go down, let's read this quote right here. It talks about what happens, right? One of the kings of the Arabia Felix, the king of Arabia Felix, who conducted a people called Sabi into Libya and called it Africa. Let's go down a little bit and let's look at a map and let's see how they moved. So long time ago, this was Africa, right? When Carthage moved and everything. But let me show you that the whole thing, when they settled up there, it used to be called Africa. But let me show you right here. So you see the Sabi, the people Sabi, and the Arabia Felix. Arabia Felix. I think this is a map of a copy of the 1800s and whatnot, basically showing what it looked like in that land. So the one in Arabia Felix and Sabi, they moved the people into Libya and called it Africa. They called it Africa, which is recorded historically. So we can actually see that in the same likeness, right? They filled this area, the Arabs. Remember, they filled all of Arabia, the happy, and they also went down and they settled in the upper area of Africa. We can find that in genetics, and we find them upper in here as well. In fact, the Ashkenazi has a high portion of E1B1B in them. The E1B1B lineage is actually going to be one of the lineages of the E lineage that's commonly seen in a lot of people in Europe. It's commonly seen. So you can actually see that E lineage is going to be your original Arab. Your Natufians are actually your Shemites. That's who your Natufians is. The Natufians are actually your Shemitic lines. That's who the Natufians is. So you can see they came down, settled in these areas. That's complete fulfillment to historical information and biblical information, because it is also recorded, as we see the Sabians, we see them all in the scriptures and stuff like that. It was desert people, right? It says the Sabi, right? Sabi. They said they were in the territory of Southwest Arabia, right? Talk about those things. So we know that Flavius Josephus was talking about real people, right? They also known to be called Nubians and Muslims and things like that. Those are also things they were also known for and whatnot. Also want to show you a scripture real fast. Let me show you a scripture. What do they look like? There's a son of Ishmael, and he has a very interesting name, right? There's just some Midianites and everything. It just talks about the sons of Keturah and everything. Obviously, Abraham sent them into Arabia, which we see in the scriptures. But let me show you something when we think about the sons of Ishmael. So right here, you can see right here, it just talks about the son. You can see right here, Abraham took a wife of Keturah. And remember what happened? He said he gave them gifts and sent them away from a far country, right? Eastward to the east country. Where's eastward of Israel? Arabia. So he sent them to Arabia. So you see that Ephraim right there? That's the one who his son, right? Ephraim, grandson of Abraham, had moved the people into Africa and called it Africa. They moved the people into Libya and called it Africa, right? So you can see right there, it's a little information on these things. Now let's look at Ishmael's son's name, Dedan, or in a sense, not Dedan, but Kedar. Let's look at Kedar. Kedar, you've probably seen it like the tense of Kedar. That means, as in a sense, swarthy, right? What does swarthy look like? What does swarthy mean? What is dusky? What does dusky mean? Dusky, swarthy. Based upon the skin of the tents, of skin or tents, right? What would a tan tent look like? A tan tent will start darkening by the heat and it'll start looking darker. So it's basically just letting you know that Kedar was basically given the name of swarthy, dusky, basically darker skin, that he's darker skin. That doesn't mean that everyone with the lineage E1B1B is dark skin, but it does mean that the lineage of E1B1B is predominantly originally dark skin. That's important to understand. But someone can also become lighter skinned by the woman's line. That's something that can happen. Now, what's important to understand that this is a great example of who is in details of scriptures, who is who, and can we find their genetics today? Can we prove the Bible genetically, right? Because the Bible actually is giving us information that we can take and find pinpointly on a Haplogroup table. We can put it on a Haplogroup table and try to pinpoint everyone. Because remember, all these are related. Ishmael's related to Israel. Israel's related to Moab. Moab's related to Edom. All these are related, cousins and brothers and things like that, in that sense of understanding. They're all going to be at the same father line. All of them going to be the same father line. That's what we see. We see that whole area completely filled. And that's what we see with the Natufian. The truth of the Natufian is that they are the Shemites. The Natufian are 100% the Shemitic lines of the people of the book. That's actually who the Natufians are. So remember how we looked at some information, how we know the E lineage and the L3 lineage actually came down here and invaded these things. So obviously it's important to know Ishmael didn't want Israel with them. They always pushed them downwards. That's why if you notice on a color coordinated map, you can see that you will have more E1B1A down here, which is younger than E1B1B because Ishmael is older than Israel and Esau is older than Israel, just to get a little understanding on those things. So E1B1A younger, and later on, because no one was down here at this time, was pushed down. There's no ancient DNA of people down here. Very important to understand. Only ancient DNA we find is of A and B lineages. We don't find E lineage down here. E lineage is up here. You can see mainly in these areas because, like we said, looking at the information, they settled in these areas of Africa, taking Libya and calling it Africa. So you can see those things. So very important. So the rare one is E1B1A, the small portion. And you'll see that sometimes that's pinpointed on maps where their homeland is, So you'll see that sometimes on maps for their homeland. So you can see, even on ancient times, in ancient times, E1B was here. Ishmael reached, remember what it said about Ishmael? He had 12 princes. 12 princes Ishmael had. So he reached a lot of lands a long time ago. In fact, those are the Chaldeans. Those are who the Chaldeans are. Long story short, they're the ones from Spain. But going up a little bit, let's talk about tea, real fast. Just a real quick thing. Why you find tea in the Middle East? Long story short, is just because the same migration. We can find tea in Europe. You can find tea here in this area. You can find tea here in this area. Tea is native to Europe. Just long story short, but they came down here and settled here. So some of them came down and settled in those areas. That's what happened later on. But let's go back up. So what did we just learn today? So remember we started right here. We just learned about the ancient people called the Natufians. We just learned about the ancient people called the Natufians who are native to the Levant. These are the Shemites. Remember, they're all going to be the same people. And the Bible describes them all being from the same line of Shem. They're all going to be from the same Haplogroup. They're going to be having the same father in a sense of understanding. They're going to be from Shem, leading down the line of who you see today. And remember, Natufian, again, just to make it clear, where the word Natufian came from, what does it mean, and where did it come from? I guess this is a good way to summarize it right down here. Yeah, this one doesn't really have that pinpoint that I want to read to you. I think it's up here. I'm going to read it right here. I'm going to just read this and I'm going to go to the one up there. The Natufian culture was discovered by British archaeologist Dorothy Garrod during her excavation at the Shakab cave in Jerusalem, in the Judean hill in the west bank of the Jordan River. Prior to the 1930s, basically it wasn't known about what was there. Let me go up and read this one directly. What does Natufian mean? Dorothy Garrod coined the term Natufian based on her excavations at Shakab Cave, Wadi and Natuf, Wadi and Natuf. And in fact, that was a brother who basically he put a very interesting quote real fast right there. Very interesting, quick fact. Wadi and Natuf is Arabic, right, for Valley of Natuf. Very, very, very nice to share that. Very nice to share that. So right here you can see Wadi and Natuf in the Western Jordan Mountains. Western Jordan Mountains. And these mountains, right, the Judean mountains which surround Jerusalem, where remember they don't bury their bodies, they don't bury people in the city. They bury people in the mountains, outside the place, right? We see that in the scriptures. They had a place that they bought, right? Hebron, we looked at Hebron in direct location. That's actually one of the places where we find the Natufian DNA. As you can see here, just going right to the place where the digs is, you can see what they say. The Natufian culture has been documented in dozens of sites. Around 90 have been excavated, including, you can look at the names here, some probably look familiar and whatnot, get an idea on what you see on different names. Some people are more, people who are more native to the land or know more about the land probably will get a little more out of these locations and everything. But you can always go to them and click them. You can see them as far as different locations, right? You got far as Iran and stuff like that. You got some that's really far in different areas. So you can see some of these things right here. We just looked at this one where remember L3 is found. We looked at that one right here. That's that one up there and above Syria, right? That's where L3 was found. L3 was found above Syria. So if someone ever says L3 never left Africa, then they probably don't really know what actually is going on. So I just want to show you that real fast. So just to get a clear understanding on these things, again, when we looked at Hebron, one of the most important things is those biblical locations, right? It lets us know right here several other biblical cities are located where the biblical cities, and then Hebron mountains, right? Where you get Mount Hebron, right? You can see these things. Now, Mount Hebron is going to be a mountain edge. Obviously, that's going to be a place where you can see right here, Judean mountains, Mount Hebron. Maybe I can get a map here. You can see right here, during the Crusades at the time of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, all Hebron hills fare under the dominion of such and such. You can see all these things. I'm just going to see where is, I'm going to show you information right on Hebron. In fact, let's see if it's right over here. I'm going to go down to where that's talked about, just so I can go right to the place for you and read that again. I'm going to go to probably down here somewhere. Hebron Hills. Maybe it's here. No, this is the same place. I'm going to go to Hebron. I'm just going to put it down. Or let's just do it like that. I want to show you Hebron real fast. Right here. So here's Hebron. You can see right there. So remember, that's the place where you will basically have David ruling, right? David will rule in that area. Remember, where is it at? Where is Hebron? It lets us know, nested in the Judean mountains. And where was the Natufian DNA named after? It was named after basically the Judean mountains, long story short. That's actually what the Natufian, as you see right here, a cave. They was named after a cave, Wadi and Natuf, in the Judean mountains, right? Those Judean mountains also surround Hebron, which is a very important place that as you see, it was a city that pretty much, had a lot of, Judeans settled there. Long story short, you can see some information on those things and whatnot. I'm gonna close this. So let's continue reading. Let's finish reading. Let's finish watching this video, because this video that you had today, you haven't really seen an in-depth study like this today of the Natufian, the Shemitic Natufian. That's what you're seeing today. So I'm gonna let this continue playing.
Is the site of a Natufian village. And the people were using the cave, which is a very deep cave. It goes way back into the into the hillside. But they were living outside of the cave on terraces. And those terraces, they were investing work in. They began to build walls to retain the soils on the terraces. They began to build little structures on the terraces. They began to bury their dead on the terraces.
When we talk about the Natufian, what we're talking about is the shift from small groups of nomadic hunters and gatherers to fully sedentary occupation, right? One of the reasons we can say that is you've got these permanent installations. You don't invest that much time and effort if in 2 weeks you're going to be leaving again, right? You can see here this terrace wall, right? Also, investment in time and energy, permanency. The number of burials that we have here. Again, I mentioned that we have 115, 120 individuals now, minimum number of. And we have evidence from microfauna, for example, commensals, which we don't see in smaller, more nomadic-oriented sites.
Oh, so you've got like rats that are living.
Rats, house mouse, sparrow, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful, and they're well documented. We've got one MA and a dissertation come out of this from our department. So it's
they don't live away from human habitation now.
Right. The humans create this magnificent habitation for these kinds of animals. So, and you see them in other kinds of sites, but not in the kinds of densities that you see here.
They're living out here. They're using the cave for something, but they're living out here. They've got houses out here.
Bonus. You can live, be a Natufian without a cave. Because there are villages in Enam and other places without a cave. The cave is nice.
Another thing that's changing in Natufian times is politics. If you're going to have large sedentary populations, you have to negotiate the use of space. You're going to encounter more different kinds of people doing more different kinds of things around you, and you're going to have ways of regulating those people so that the society's able to subsist. We see in Natufian times many pieces of evidence about the development of these political systems.
But we have a copy of one of the individuals that was found from here. That wasn't the exact spot. You notice that on the skull there's something stuck to this is a dentalium shell headdress. Dentalium shells and other materials were used as decorative elements, jewelry. One thing that's very, very interesting is that there are individuals, male, female, sometimes youngsters even, that have this kind of decoration, others that do not. So we're thinking, your treatment in death somehow reflects your standing in life.
Right.
But we may be seeing also as a shift from kind of egalitarian hunter-gatherers to some kind of hierarchical social organization.
We make a big deal when we see, a little bit of ornamentation in Neanderthals. But here, it's systematic. I mean, this is helping to organize their society.
Right. We're still trying to work out, just who may have gotten it, who may not have gotten it, and this kind of thing. And you find dentalium shells scattered out through the excavations also, just lonely pieces, whatever. And it's mostly in the early Natufian that we see this. Very, very little of this kind of decoration that you see in the late Natufian.
So did they just give it up, or just different social?
There seems to be, the hypothesis right now is that for whatever reason, we're not sure why, there's a bit of a dispersal again. And a shift from a little bit more mobility. They lose some of the sedentism. Some people related this to the younger dryas, poor environmental conditions. That doesn't really fit now what we have from the dates, whatever. So it's a question that we're trying to deal with. What happened between the following the early Natufian going into the late. But as we're getting into our late Natufian here, we're finding that it wasn't such a kind of flimsy sort of settlement either. So again, there are a number of questions that we're trying to deal with.
Sure, yeah. So the Natufian people really give us the best evidence we have about what lifestyles were like among the last sedentary hunter-gatherers in this part of the world. And archaeologists and anthropologists now understand that as we go to study how agriculture emerged, the social structures, the use of time and place, the yearly cycle, all of these things are things that hunter-gatherers were understanding for thousands of years before we begin to see the development of domestication of plants and animals that enabled agriculture to begin in earnest. Agriculture, as a change in the subsistence pattern, is fundamentally economic. It's about the relationship of humans to each other and to their environments. But the social changes that enabled it are changes that happened without domesticated plants and animals. They were changes that represent innovations in human social systems. Those social systems are what began to change not only here in the Near East, but elsewhere in the world as agriculture was emerging.
All right, so amen, family. So what we're actually finding is direct evidence of the people of the Bible. Now, what's interesting is it may not be up to the common quote of the world standards, as many people, they may think that the common people who are calling themselves Jews today are Jews. Now, in the sense of understanding of the biblical, linguistic, historical, and genetic information, it's actually important to understand that almost universally, all the evidence points to a people that, when we look at the E lineage, it would represent a people that went into pretty much captivity and was scattered by the edge of the sword and also fell by the edge of the sword. And obviously, the land is not ruled by this lineage. So Messiah was right. Messiah was telling the truth when he said that that Jerusalem would be trampled down by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles fulfilled, because the E1A lineage, the E1B1A lineage, is not in majority of Jerusalem. That is actually a fulfillment to prophecy. There's a fulfillment to prophecy on these things. Now, the reason why we're also talking about this is because it's also important to note one more thing. Let's talk about one last thing real fast. Now, you notice how the land is laid out like this? Remember how we was talking about how the Natufian genetics is, how it's laid out like this, all around this area? And it got that loop right there. You see that loop in that area right there? And you can see this is a genetic site, right? They're not altering information. They're just showing what they're finding. They got that little loop right there. If we notice on the map, notice something really interesting here. You see what you see right here? You see that little loop right there? See that loop? That's where Sidon is. You can see it right here as well. How the genetics been like that. As they don't settle, they're not mainly settled here, but they've been like this, and they're still down here. Notice that they're right here like that. If we look again right here, we can see they reach all the way down here. And notice on the other side of Jordan, because remember, that's when they came, they went over, when they crossed over the Red Sea, Red Sea pretty much, when the sea parted, and they went over, right? And they got to Jordan, and they crossed the Jordan. When they actually passed through, Moab and Ammon and whatnot, when they went over these areas and they settled, and then they were going to go cross over. You can see right here, they can cross over right here, and that's their where they are right there, and you can still see that loop there. And notice on the other side, you got a different lineage here, but it's the same. They're all going to be family related, because remember, Moab, Ammon, and Edom, they're all related. All these are all related. And notice it reaches down here, and it goes up. And you can see right here, it goes up past that curve right there, and it curves down like this, curves down. And this actually their home. This would actually be known as their homeland. This actually would be known as the homeland of the Natufian. You can actually, if you ever look it up, you can find it right here. It basically has it right here. It says right here, basically Natufian homeland, basically, long story short. So you can see what's going on there. So the reason why I wanted to show you that is because I want you to see that when something matches this accurately, that's when we want to take those things into account, because we also got to consider that they're all related and they're all going to be in the same areas. That is biblically accurate. They got to be biblically accurate and historically accurate and genetically accurate, right? Genetically meaning they have to be the same. They have to have the same. They have to be from the same line. They have to be from the same line, and they have to be in the same location. So that's what we're seeing with the information, that the Bible is a historically accurate, genetically accurate, and pinpoint accurate book that we ourselves have the ability to look at in even more depth on these things. I got one more thing I wanted to show. I had another video, but I don't think we need to look at that one because that one is, based on that one place. This is actually, let me actually show this place. This place right here is actually another place where the Natufian DNA is found. Maybe I'll show it, maybe. Let me actually open this up and show you that real fast. This is another place where the DNA is found. But the reason why I'm showing you this is because not a lot of videos on these things. You can see right here, major sites where they're found right here in this location. I think this will have a map of that location. Let's click it. So right there, you see that location? This is Syria. Remember we found the female DNA here? That's a major location. It said that's majorly where the Natufians were. Majorly here and obviously in here. So you see where they're right here? I'm going to show you now a video. Actually, I might as well show the video. I'm going to show you the video of this location. Now, what's interesting here, you're going to also note on the video, they show how they look and whatnot and all that. But just take note that the way that they look, they were actually darker skinned. They were actually a darker skinned people. But they also are going to be a people that is going to be native to this land. So I'm going to let you see this little video because that's what today is. Today is going over Synthetic Sunday and talking about genetics and how the biblical narrative matches with the explanation in genetics. So let's keep on going and check out this thing right here. Very interesting little piece. So I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm just going to let you see it for example. But this, if you want to see this video, it'll be basically where you see Dorothy right here, right underneath her picture. And you'll see these little videos right here. It'll be the middle one right here. Because I'm not going to play the whole thing. And you can see right here, it'll be right above this. That's what it'll be. It'll be in the description. It's the reason why, because it's 17 minutes and it's obviously informative on these things, but it's not going to give you every last thing, but it's going to give you summaries of what they went through in life and how their life was, because I think those things are also important to know how they lived. Do they match the lifestyle of Shemites? Yes. Long story short, they do. But I'm not going to play that. It's just an interesting video. But this location right here, that's information to this location where you actually find the Natufian DNA. So very, very interesting. You can see right here where it is. It's a site in the Euphrates Valley in modern Syria. So modern Syria, that's where you find that genetics, right? Where you find in the Bible where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob went to find their wives. And Abraham himself said that's where his family was. And that's what we find. We find the genetics in agreement with that. So I wanted to show you this thing. So it's up to you as a beloved brother and sister to choose what you're going to do with this information. But I want you to know that indeed, that this information that you've seen today is professionally verified. Professionally verified. But before we end this, let's answer some questions real fast. Is there only one Tyre and Zidon? In the land of Israel, there's only one Tyre and Zidon in the land of Israel. Because today, south in Levant, there is a place named Tyre Sidon, and a north place is Tyre. Oh, yes. So there is, there's going to be locations that's named later on, but the ancient Tyre and Zidon, those locations would be basically, right here. So if there's another city there or something changed, then that would be a change there. You can see Mount Carmel right there, Mount Carmel. And you can see, I want to see if you can see Hebron on here. Hebron right there. Hebron in the area of Jerusalem, or the area of what you have, the kingdom of Judah down here. So Hebron right there, Jerusalem. This will be the mountain range of the Judean, of the basically what you call the Judean mountains. And you got Carmel and the northern tribes. And then that's where your Tyre and Zidon is. Tyre and Zidon, that's where you get your loop, that loop of the Natufian homeland. They loop around the area of the Phoenicians right there. So you can see that. Just to get a little more, I guess, clear on that question right there. So I'm going to close some of these. So you see, I just want to show you those maps right there. So I'm going to close these. We don't need those now. We don't need that or this. And let me just make sure we looked at everything on this that we needed to. I think we did. All right, close that. I'm going to wait till that closes. All right. I already looked at the flatbread. Now I'm just going to, let's do a summary on what we looked at here. So we're going to do a quick summary on what we just looked at. This is what we looked at today. Today we looked at the Natufian people. The Natufian people are native to Israel. They actually are spread out through all this and the lower areas over here and some of the north. So they're going to be in this area. This is their homeland when we think about the E1B1A lineage. And remember, there's going to be other families like Edom, Moab, and all those other families and whatnot. But they all started around here. This is actually the cradle of the human race right here. This is where Ham, Shem, and Japheth split. But remember, Ham split goes down here, lower, and then Japheth goes up here, and then Shem stays around this area. Shem stays around this area. But you know, like we follow history, what's the word? Arabs, or in a sense, Keturah from Abraham. Remember, he has two wives that are other than Sarah. He has Keturah and he has Hagar. So he has both of those, and is also noted that they basically merge. Some of their daughters also merge with Israel. They extend out this way into the Middle East. They go and they take Libya and they call it Africa, Upper Africa. And then they also settle in these areas. We find them in ancient genetics too, that they settled in all these areas up here. Now we also note that when we look in the land of Sidon, we can also note that there's when the J lineage comes in the land of Sidon. Those are going to be the area that the Natufians are not in, but they're going to be in the Levant area. You can see what's actually in Sidon, the genetics of what's in Sidon. You can see a lot of A's and B's, and you can see a lot of J's, J lineages breaking off, going down from there. See over here, going over here. You can also see that there's other sources that also agree with the finds. You can see this source right here says that ancient Israelites are typically E1B1A and T1 haplotypes, right? And we already know it's not T1, it's actually E1B1A. But T1 is a visitor into that land. And the reason why is because we also find the Natufian matches the layout of the land described by the Bible. The Natufian matches the layout of the land described by the Bible. And they always have the E lineage. So we can see right here, we can always follow them throughout all time. We can follow them throughout all their different ages of time. And we can verify what we see, that we do see them with that same E lineage. That's one thing that doesn't change. The Natufian keep the E lineage in them. Remember, they're Shemites. And then you have your Natufian DNA when we talk about which one, right here, long story short, Natufian Y found in the Levant was older, basically older 94% E1B1B. And then in the younger, which is 6% E1B1A. So only 6%, a small percentage of E1B1A, right? It says, so also we obviously looked at some other information. We looked at the location. We looked at where Natufian came from. It came from the cave called Wadi and Natuf, which is actually in the western Judean hills, which actually surrounds the Hebron mountains and things like that, where the kingdom of Judah was. That's actually their homeland. They're also at the land of Carmel and things like that in the northern tribes. So they fill all those areas. So you can see here, going down a little bit, we already looked at the genetics. And we talked about the person who found the Natufian DNA and where she found them and why she named it Natufian, right? Because it's actually off of the Judean mountains or Jerusalem hill. You can see they're the first ones to make the flatbread. They're the first people to start doing agriculture and stuff like that, in the sense of the details of it, because there's a lot of details when it comes to how they lived their life. They lived their lives like normal people. They were the Shemites. You can see where their homeland, you can see their ideas. I'm going to click this and go over from here. You can see right here, the area of the Natufians, they settled here. This is their homeland in ancient times. The E lineage is found over here, and L3, the female line of L3, which is in most of the ones with E1B1A. L3 was found up here in the area where you find Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's wives. Over here, you can also see when we look at the autosomal DNA, there's an idea on those things going over, because it's also in the same time frame. The pre-pottery Neolithic era, or pre-pottery Neolithic A, B, and C, those eras, which is basically, they say, in the sense, they say 13,000 to about 9,000, but it's actually, long story short, it's from the start of when Abraham buys Hebron to the end of the Book of Kings. That's actually how long they're there. They're there for a long time. Even we got history, we got documents. We even talk about the documents of them. Here, let me move real fast. All right. We also have documents of them being in Jerusalem when the sieges happened. We got documents of them going into Africa, being sent down, and that's recorded by the historians. We also got the documents of the split of D and E, which comes from CT. And remember, we noticed that CT makes CF, which is all the lines up here. CT also makes DE, which makes your, right here, your D lineages, which is your Japanese, and some of your Indian and things like that in different areas. You also have your lineage of your E lineage, which is actually going to be native to here, and then it goes down, right? That's important to know. Over here, we already looked at the ages, right? This is the ages of time, right? We looked at 1300s, 13, and then we can go down to about 8. Now, obviously, be careful with these times. It just means ancient times. We can actually follow the Natufian further in time, closer to our time. We can follow their genetics throughout time, pretty much. Right here, we just talked about this part in the book, right here. So you can see right here, we already talked about this study from 1973. Suggests that the Natufians and their descendants formed a core population in Israel that could be traced down to recent periods, but was added to or temporarily displaced at certain times because they went into captivity. And then we looked at that one with more detail on it, on the captivities that they went through when they talk about Jerusalem and all those things and whatnot, and the Babylonians and everything with all those things. And we also looked at a historical document, which we seen that it word for word told us about every single captivity, every single one. The 70 AD, the one with Titus Vespasian, which was 132 and to 135. We also looked at these other ones with the Persians, the Romans, basically the Arabs that happened. Remember with Muhammad and stuff that had happened. And then you have obviously all the things that happened with the Christians and everything. Just moving. All right. So you see those are, and then it has dates for certain ones, for other ones that happen. All the exiles throughout all times, they record how they got into Africa and different things like that. Obviously the lay out the land, we'll need to look at that. So that's basically what we looked at today. So what we looked at today was basically information on a Natufian, on who they are and where they went, and the information on these things. And there's biblical information here too, to show you some things and whatnot, right? Going down right here, you can see Hebron mentioned 78 times or 87 times in the Hebrew Bible. David ruled in Hebron. Basically, long story short, the sons of Aaron moved to Hebron. There was also other Israelites that came to Hebron. Hebron was a very popular place where they came there and settled to that place. They all settled there. So this is going to be information that's going to be in the description. Obviously, there's more information here we didn't go over. You know what this is? Probably a PDF, I'm guessing. Maybe. I think we already opened that PDF. So I just wanted to show you this because basically what you're seeing here on this note is going to be something that you yourself, you can see, you can open it up. It has all the sources that you've seen today. You can see, you can click them. You can see their actual sources directly to the direct informations that we're looking at today. Everything's cited. Let me actually see what I just downloaded. Just want to make sure I went over this thing. Yep. You know what that is? That's just talking about CT and everything, because it just lets us know Haplogroup CT is therefore the common ancestral male lineage of all men alive today, except the ones that belong to A and B haplogroups. And remember, we already talked about how A and B is native to Africa, that the E lineage is not native to Africa, but the A and B lineage is native to Africa. That's very important. Go down a little bit. So I'm just making sure we hit everything. Everything else, that's some other stuff here. And remember, we already looked because they also wanted to see if the J lineage was in a Natufian. The Natufian are all E lineages or from CT. But the J lineage is not in the Natufians. It says that haplogroup J was absent in all Natufian and Neolithic Levant male individuals examined thus far. That means the J lineage is not native to Israel. So very important to know. So that's just a sense of understanding. This has other information, but that's what this note was for. This note was for reviewing who is in the Natufian and getting an understanding on them, on their E lineage. So now you know who the Natufian is. Mysterious people that you probably never heard of, or you may have heard of, but now today you got more information on. I hope everyone today learned something new. And with that, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, that's all I got for you, family. I wish this thing opened up so I could show you this thing, but it's not really nothing, to be honest with you. Oh, look, there we go. I don't know why now it opens up, but you can see here on this thing, get an idea of the layout of the land. Now notice you got your Natufian right there, right? This is actually throughout time. You're gonna still have them, obviously still living there in different areas of time. You're gonna have Israel in this area while a lot of these things are going on, right? Very important. You can see, not so clear on this, I don't know why, but you can see a little idea, changing of times. You can see there's a lot going on in the area. This is how detailed genetics is today, that they can map these ancient genetics and know who is who. You can see Shemites, Shemitic lines, whatnot, Shemites in these areas, right? You're gonna have obviously your Arabs. But remember, the detailed part is looking at the full picture of the Natufians and the historical documents of those things. I'm just gonna go over because we don't need to see the rest of this because it just talks over, about some things that's going on here. So this is gonna be in the description too. This is gonna be in the description and everything. So with that, family, I hope this was well with you to learn who the Natufian is and how they are actually the Shemitic lines of Israel. So it may be a little different than what the world teaches, but what you just seen today is biblically, linguistically, genetically, historically, and actually facts that are verifiable and agreed by professionals all over. So with that, family, you just seen evidence of the Bible with solid proof. So with that, family, the Natufians, they are going to be your E lineage, right? Being from maybe your E1 lineages, mainly from E1, B1B, and some very rare, your MT of the L from the female, and then having your E1, B1A from the male, which is rare. So with that, family, Be blessed, be beloved, and amen.